Since the very beginning of the series, Pokémon has had man-made areas that have become abandoned for all sorts of reasons, just like in real life. Modern ruins have cropped up in the last century, the remnants of economic bubbles popping and obsolescence. For one reason or another, people are fascinated with them, and spend hours watching videos of people exploring dilapidated malls and hospitals. These urban areas left to rot give me a profound feeling that I have difficulty describing. It's something like a mix between sadness and nostalgia. An empty building is wrong to me, maybe even frightening. Buildings, after all, are man-made constructions. They're meant to be occupied by people. So when one isn't, it feels alien. Even in a group, being somewhere abandoned can make you feel as if you're the only person in the entire world. The second I step foot into an abandoned building, 8 billion people vanish in an instant. To others, an overgrown building is an indicator of the Earth's beautiful tendency toward nature. To me, a building in disrepair, taken back over by the planet, evokes strong feelings of an apocalypse. Like something deeply wrong has happened. When I was a kid, my friends and I explored this abandoned water treatment facility out in the country. Almost nothing was left standing but one of the brick water towers that went deep into the ground and high up into the sky. At the ground level, there was an opening that we could use to look down into it. What we saw was a spiral staircase running around the rim of this huge tube that went down and disappeared into an inky black pool. I remember that I got an odd feeling in my stomach, like it was made of lead and trying to bring me down to the ground. Many thoughts were going through my head at the time. I hoped I didn't fall in. I wondered how deep it went. But primarily, what sort of creature would reside at the bottom of that black void? That's exactly the kind of question that one would find answered at the end of a dungeon like Mauville or the Kanto power plant. So I thought I'd revisit those places in Pokemon games that still fascinate me, and try to figure out what made them that way. Let's go over some criteria first to give you an idea of what places I'll be covering. Primarily, I want to talk about structures that went up in the time since industrialization, so no ancient ruins for this video. As cool as they are, it's harder to get a sense of a lack of people in these areas, because for the most part, we don't know exactly what went on in these structures. A glance at the old chateau, though, and there's no question. There also needs to be a sense of danger, real or imagined. The environment needs to be unwelcoming, even if it's just the risk of getting caught by law enforcement. A truly abandoned place should make you feel in your gut as if you probably shouldn't be there. There should also be an element of urban legend. I want you to picture in your mind an abandoned building in your town. What do you know about it? How did you learn about it? You probably didn't research it yourself. You didn't read books, you didn't watch a documentary, you've probably never been inside. Most likely you were fed hearsay by your Uncle Frank while he was 4 beers deep at the family barbecue. Finally, the place should be forgotten by most people. The average person living their life shouldn't have more than a few thoughts about the place in passing. With that out of the way, let's start where it all began, with the areas in Kanto. In terms of abandoned places, let's talk about the Pokemon Mansion first, because it's not an optional area. The Pokemon Mansion is where the player goes to obtain the key to Blaine's gym. It's in quite the state of disrepair, and traversing through the place requires you to take advantage of the broken building by falling through the floor at some points. Burglars and Pokemon of the fire and poison types litter the premises. There are various statues that allow you to control locked doors throughout. It seems like it should be haunted. I mean, it's an abandoned mansion. But it was no tragic death that caused the abandonment of this place. It was the creation of new life. Along the way to the key, you can read optional journals lying about that detail the discovery of Mew and creation of Mewtwo. This mansion belonged at one point to a brilliant scientist who succeeded in cloning Mew. In Generations 1 and 3, the place is cleaned out, but in the Let's Go games, the actual machinery is still there. Across most depictions, it is strongly implied that the scientist was Mr. Fuji, both in-game and in supplementary material. I believe that Mr. Fuji regretted taking Mew from its home and subsequently creating the violent Mewtwo. He abandoned his previous life after leaving Mew on Faraway Island, taking up residence in Lavender Town, where the player meets him. His mansion was left to rot, its bones picked over by petty thieves and us, the players. And that's what became of the Pokemon Mansion, until it was destroyed by a volcanic eruption by the time of the Johto games. Maybe that was for the best. If we fly over to Route 10, we can find the power plant in Kanto. It's a massive rubble-filled structure that's completely optional. In most versions, it's a breeding ground for all the electric-type Pokemon Kanto has to offer, including the legendary Zapdos. The power plant is pretty standout in my mind because unlike most dungeons in Kanto, there aren't any trainers to battle here. No one dares to explore the rubble for precious copper wire. That makes it seem more dangerous in my mind. Either that or it's just kind of out of the way. By the time of the Johto games, it's been renovated to provide power for the rail line running through Kanto and Johto. Except, I don't think that it was ever renovated. Given that it goes from decayed to bustling between Kanto and Johto, I believe that the place was just never finished. This is outright stated to be the case in the Pokémon Adventures manga, and I think it's probably the case for the game continuity. Perhaps this was because they lacked the necessary funding. In real life, this happens all the time. In more dire cases, funds are misplaced on purpose. But I think something else happened to halt construction. I believe that Zapdos moved in, and either due to conservation efforts or just fear, the developers left the power plant as is. This was probably recently. Zapdos left, and so construction resumed. I don't think anything bad happened here, which, as you'll come to see, is what usually makes these places abandoned. Kanto, when viewed through the lens of the Johto games, has a completely different vibe in my opinion. What once seemed like a pretty lawless and disorganized land has come together to feel a little bit more alive. The Hoenn region has a few abandoned areas to speak of. I'll speak first on New Mauville because it breaks new ground in terms of abandoned places. You may be thinking, isn't it just a rehash of the power plant we just discussed? Not entirely. For me, the backstory is what makes this place. When we first visit New Mauville, it's in semi-working order. It's just a subterranean power plant that was part of the Mauville City expansion project. Watson sends us there in order to decommission the place after the large generator starts to fail. Most likely, they just never ended up needing that much power because the city never expanded. Watson outright states that he's given up on updating Mauville City, which seems to be a recurring theme in Pokémon games. The idea of older characters having given up on their dreams. If they're lucky, the player steps in to vicariously see them through. In the case of Watson though, his dreams in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald remain just that, as dreams. If you didn't know, Watson's expansion project actually went through in the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire continuities. Because of that success turning Mauville into Mauville, New Mauville was intended to be an entire underground city stretching for dozens of stories beneath the planet. A single barricade prevents us from going down further into the bowels of New Mauville, where who knows what kind of secrets lie. Watson only sends us there when we're an experienced trainer, and something turned the all-clear signal off. I would really like to find out what, but we never do. Presumably due to the initial success of New Mauville, Sea Mauville was commissioned in order to gather resources from the ocean. But for one reason or another, New Mauville was shut down and abandoned, leading directly to the failures of Sea Mauville, which already had its own problems. I believe that the main reason the place fizzled out in the remakes is because Watson turned whistleblower on the company financing the place. They were damaging the environment and abusing their employees, to make an understatement. The whole situation makes me feel really badly for Watson. In the Gen 3 continuity, he's probably haunted by what-ifs and what could-have-beens, completely oblivious that in another universe he tried, got far, and still failed. Sea Mauville is really cool and worth talking about, but not for the scope of this video. It's cool, but it's not really abandoned. It's been repurposed. You see, there's one thing that eliminates one of our criteria, the sense of danger. There's a lady posted near the entrance collecting admissions fees. They wouldn't be inviting trainers to come check this place out if there was an explicit danger. If we jump back in time and across dimensions though, we can explore the SS Cactus, the abandoned ship that Sea Mauville replaces in the remake. The vibe is pretty similar, although the abandoned ship lacks even 10% of the lore Sea Mauville has, unfortunately. The abandoned ship gets points in my books for being an abandoned place in the middle of nowhere, the open ocean. That adds somewhat of a fear factor. If something happens to you here, you're way more likely to just disappear. There are many trainers on the ship, although they all seem to be doing their own thing or treasure hunting. A lot of trainers from this place were repurposed for Sea Mauville pretty much one-to-one, except for this guy. This trainer is perhaps the most dangerous entity encountered in any Pokémon game, let alone abandoned places. He was patched out in Emerald though, so this isn't evidence of the supernatural, as much as I'd like it to be. Just a funny little glitch that affects two other trainers in Ruby and Sapphire. So, what happened here? In the anime continuity, the abandoned ship ran aground during a storm, and I think that's pretty much what happened in the games. Hoenn's ocean is quite rocky as a result of needing to box the player in, and there are plenty of shallow areas that can sneak up on you. I imagine that something happened to hamper navigation or visibility, and the ship simply crashed. It's unknown if anyone perished in the accident, but I doubt people would explore it so wholeheartedly if something like half the passengers were belly up just below deck. The ship is quite stable, and whatever caused it to be abandoned happened some time ago. At most, I want to say the ship ran aground 30 years prior, though it could be less. The fact that there's still treasure to be found, though, makes me lean towards sooner rather than later. The Pokemon world is filled with looters and people trying to make a quick buck. By all means, we shouldn't be the ones to discover the scanner in the storage room, but we are. And we can trade it for a deep-sea tooth or scale. Nothing will top the experience, though. Honestly, the abandoned ship is one of my favorite areas in all of Pokemon, and Mauville reinforces that. The Sinnoh region has one abandoned place that's very notorious. I used to have nightmares about the place, and going there at night meant I got no sleep. There are few things as scary as the unknown, and when left idle, the imagination can run wild, like yours might be doing right now. The Pokemon games excel at the kind of Mad Lib storytelling that lets your mind fill in the gaps. I can think of no greater example than the old chateau of Eterna Forest. This is our first abandoned area that is more likely than not haunted. There are ghosts here, not just ghost types. In the dining room, you can sometimes see an old man float toward the kitchen. If you head toward him, there's no one to be seen. Upstairs on the second floor, you can see the specter of a little girl who does a similar disappearing act. I don't believe either are ghost-type Pokemon pulling a trick. I believe they're the genuine article. This is because there are two other supernatural events which end with encounters. The Rotom in the TV, and the Gengar that appear in the room with the creepy staring portrait. The two human ghosts are just there until they aren't anymore, and their events are repeatable. I have reason to believe something sinister happened in the old chateau. Oddly, there are no trainers inside the mansion, despite its proximity to Eterna City. People in the Pokemon world are no stranger to hanging around and training in areas with high concentrations of ghost Pokemon. Sometimes they even hold battles on top of grave sites. In fact, there's one such place in Sinnoh, so it probably isn't a general avoidance of ghost-type Pokemon that keeps people out. So what happened? A common theory I've seen posited is that Rotom was involved somehow, but I'd like to try and exonerate it right now. It's likely that the Rotom we encounter in the television is the same one Team Galactic was studying in the next town over. This is reinforced to me by how in the remakes you can obtain the secret key after catching Rotom. According to journals that can be found in the room unlocked with that key, a Rotom, probably this one, had a friendly relationship with a young boy. I believe this boy to be Cyrus, a person who was born and raised in Sunnyshore's City. If this is the case, and the Rotom is truly the same Rotom from the journals, Rotom is probably from Sunnyshore's City as well. Sunnyshore's City is a place famous for a grand work of electrical engineering, so I don't think all of this is too much of a stretch. But you might be wondering how I came to the conclusion that Cyrus is the boy from the report. Cyrus is well established to be a character who prefers machines to the living. Rotom is the synthesis of a Pokemon into machine. In Ultra Sun and Moon's episode RR, immediately preceding and following your battle with Cyrus, he exchanges words with the Rotom Dex, addressing it by name. And finally, in Pokemon Masters EX, during an event, Cyrus spends hours talking with Sophocles about machinery and Rotom's capabilities. He knows the Pokemon well. I believe he met it as a boy and became friends with it. Somehow they fell out and he turned it over to Charon. It's possible that the Rotom did something intentional or accidental at the old chateau before meeting Cyrus, but I really doubt that the Pokemon would travel that far on its own. After breaking out of the lab, Rotom barely left the backyard. I doubt it went to the TV in the old chateau as a form of penance. Realistically, the ghosts are just roommates with Rotom, not victims. Another theory I've seen is that the ghosts were poisoned because there's an antidote in one of the trash cans in the kitchen, and that's where the old man ghost floats to. Surely if this was the case of someone poisoning food and then leaving the antidote for themselves, they would have used it. Also, it isn't in Platinum, only Diamond, Pearl, and their remakes. Maybe Game Freak didn't like the implications of an antidote in the kitchen, or they wanted to keep it vague and so removed it. I believe it's back in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, not because they changed their minds about it again, but because Ilka was tasked with remaking Diamond and Pearl, not Platinum. There are many examples of item locations being changed from Diamond and Pearl to Platinum, and then being restored in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. So what did happen there, and why does no one want to be here? Honestly, I don't know, and that's scarier than anything Game Freak could put in stone. I believe we can only safely conclude that someone lost their life in an unnatural way. Worth mentioning is that there isn't anything outright saying that both ghosts became ghosts at the same time. If it was only one or the other, potential causes could be narrowed down. Anything beyond they died at some point due to something that would give the place a vibe so bad that people steer clear has little foundation to go off of. We can't really say how old the old chateau is also, only that it was abandoned sometime after the invention of consumer-grade televisions. My belief that there was foul play in the old chateau is strengthened by the strange house of Unova. It's a very similar place to the old chateau on paper. It's inside of an area just outside of a town, it's filled with ghost-type Pokémon, people tend to avoid it, and it's inhabited by a human ghost that causes unexplainable things. Where they differ though is that you can find trainers inside the strange house. So, I put forward then that either something verifiably worse happened in the old chateau, or no one knows for sure. So what exactly happened in the strange house that's bad enough to keep most people away, but not all? A little girl living here fell into a deep slumber and never woke up. We meet her ghost and are tasked with taking the lunar wing to Cresselia. It's not a stretch to say that a Darkrai was probably involved, given that a similar situation involving the two lunar Pokémon plays out in the prior generation. Running under this assumption, this little girl fell into a nightmare so bad that she died. Think about the worst nightmare you've ever had in your life. Imagine how much worse it would have to be for you to stop living as a result of it. Of course, we know that the average Darkrai means no harm when it causes nightmares. The Pokédex theorizes that causing nightmares in those around it is Darkrai's passive defense mechanism. It might not even be aware of the effect it has on people. Now I want you to throw away everything I just said. You're the average Univin. You probably don't know any of that, you just know that some girl passed away young, if that. You probably run under the assumption that she got sick. Who are you to know that a nightmare creature with the capacity to take lives is running around in every shadow on the edge of your peripheral, and so you're a little more okay with running around a haunted house. Branching off of the topic of nightmares, let's explore the Dream Yard. It's a top-tier abandoned place. There's just enough mystery lying around for you to be intrigued, and no details concrete enough to give the place an overly bad vibe. It's a former research facility that's seen better days, left now as a site of childhood intrigue and Pokémon training. Dreams play a big part in Pokémon games, both the actual process and the abstract concept of looking forward optimistically. Dreams in the form of mist that Muna and Musharna release were being researched here. Whether or not the Muna line was imported here or the facility was built up around them is unclear. At some point though, the researchers closed up shop and the little dream tapirs remain. I think something went wrong here to cause the facility to be closed down, primarily due to the state it's in. Buildings don't tend to collapse as severely as in the Dream Yard's case without some kind of external factor. In the anime continuity, an explosion caused by black dream mist caused the Dream Yard to be decommissioned. I think something similar happened in the games, though maybe not as dire as an explosion caused by failure to harness a new form of energy. It's not that uncommon for psychic Pokémon to be described as not in control of their power. Perhaps a Musharna being researched lost control and made the facility collapse. Maybe it was abandoned due to lack of funding, and then a Pokémon made it collapse. The timeline of events isn't clear. I couldn't find anything suggesting how long the Dream Yard has been abandoned in the games. Of all the potential reasons for the Dream Yard to become abandoned, I doubt it was because the researchers figured out everything there was to learn about dreams. Those who research dreams in the modern day, such as Fennel, appear to be doing so solo. This suggests to me that the theorized breakthroughs that guided the creation of the Dream Yard never panned out. As I mentioned, in the anime, Dream Mist was being researched as a form of energy. That could have been the case in the game continuity as well, but just never panned out. For all the mysticism around the Dream Yard, the backstory I can gather is pretty mundane, all things considered. It's quite close in overall vibe to abandoned places I've actually been to. I'd like to visit it the most out of all the places featured in this video. As a side note, the trainers in the basement behave in a pretty weird way. They don't engage in a battle unless you initiate, and they'll turn around and reverse away from you if you get in their way. It's quite bizarre, and I don't recall this happening anywhere else. I think the previous sections have gotten pretty dark, so let's round things off with Kalos' Lost Hotel, which has nothing out of the ordinary going on. It's a place I'd very much like to visit, a mostly subterranean hotel which holds host to the punk skater culture of Kalos. There isn't much explicit lore to speak of here. The map says that it was once popular, but a tragedy left it abandoned. I didn't dig up much in terms of NPCs discussing it, or in alternate continuities. In the anime, it's still operational, and in the manga, it's merely scenery. I've got nothing concrete, except the concrete. The parts of the hotel above ground are seriously deteriorated. I hate to repeat myself, but it should not be this bad after a couple decades at most with no upkeep. I think whatever the tragedy was involved the destruction of the above ground portions of the hotel. I doubt it was a death, because then the place would probably be haunted judging by past abandoned places. I don't think it was something repeatable like an earthquake or something that would make the place structurally unsound like shoddy construction. Tons of people hang around the basement with no concern. I believe whatever happened here was a one-off incident like a wild Pokémon attack. Maybe a Rhyperior rampage, judging by the protector you can find here? I don't have too much else to say about the Lost Hotel. Like I already said, I really like the area, but every thought I have about the place is undercut with the thought of wasted potential. This place could have been much cooler with even a little bit more soft lore. This is the place where you find Rotom on Tuesdays. Imagine if they began the Rotom integration of Gen 7 here in XY. Imagine a dilapidated smart hotel where the layout is constantly shifting due to mischievous spirits inhabiting the electric locks. Instead, what we got has little to go off of. It's cool, but has almost none of the unspoken details of other abandoned places. It's a rather tame place to end this dive into abandoned places. Now, you're probably noticing that there's a couple places I haven't mentioned, and that isn't a mistake. Like Mauville, there are places that almost make the cut, but for one reason or another, I'm not as interested in. So here's a lightning round of honorable mentions. Mauville, excluded because there's an admissions fee. Enn's Castle is an awesome area to revisit after it's abandoned, but there's no mystery about what happened. The Spooky House is excluded because it's most likely just a tourist attraction. Po Town wasn't abandoned, just run into the ground by teenagers. The thrifty Mega Mart, while a vibe, is an officially sanctioned trial area. The Ultra Ruin is an actual apocalypse, not a case of a building being forgotten. I don't really count the Area Zero Lab as a truly urban abandoned place because it's more cyber apocalypse than steady economic decline. If you disagree with any of my exclusions or I missed someplace, feel free to comment about it. So now we've talked about the past and the present, leaving us only with the future. We haven't seen a truly abandoned place in a Pokemon game for quite some time. With Japan's recent economic decline, I think it's likely we'll see something again soon in new games, especially as the rural population shrinks and small towns turn into ghost towns. If Legends ZA is all about restoring and upgrading Lumio City in the future, it's likely abandoned places will feature heavily. I have something of a wish list for places I'd like to urbex in Pokemon games. I'd like to see something larger scale along the lines of an abandoned hospital, or an entirely empty company town abandoned after a tumblestone mine dried up. I just want to see something larger, something like Mauville, but without an invitation. What kind of abandoned places would you like to see in Pokemon games? Feel free to let me know down below. If you like this video, also let me know. This was a departure from my usual content, and really fun to research and write. If this goes over well, I'd like to make more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some tetanus boosters to go get. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire hide a tale of squandered potential, of regret, of decline. We all have hopes and dreams. That we will achieve something great, or that something great will happen to us. An unfortunate and harsh truth, though, is that not everyone gets their happy ending. We like to imagine that the only thing that could kill the dream is an act of God, of tragedy. But an even harsher truth is that when failure comes for us, it rarely comes with a flash of lightning from on high. In most cases, failure is preceded by a nearly inaudible whimper. Roadblocks appear, setbacks add up, the money runs out, interest dwindles, and then it's over and we're left with ourselves alone. We regret what could have been, the grand idea in our heads, the dream, we tell ourselves, if I had only done this instead. This is the story of Mauville and the death of Greater Mauville Holdings. Greater Mauville Holdings is a now defunct company that one can hear whispers of in the Hoenn region. Mauville was likely not the first project by Greater Mauville Holdings, but it is perhaps the most infamous. It's stuck in the past and provides a good place to start when piecing together the history of its developers. Located off Route 108, Mauville is a half-sunken husk that's been left to rot. The player requires dive to fully explore it, so I would recommend against visiting here yourself before you have access to it. The story is best experienced completely, not partially. Let's explore together and piece together the story as it's presented to us. Climbing up the incline, we reach an informational NPC who gives us the first taste of what exactly happened here. She's part of a nature preservation society and is happy to answer questions that we might have. She informs us that this facility was intended to extract natural resources and was later closed down. Rather than being dismantled as planned, it was left in place after environmental surveys revealed a unique ecosystem had begun to thrive here at Mauville. Notably, rare mangrove trees are growing here, plants exclusive to only Mauville and Moss Deep City. She also explains that the tilt in the facility came over time as it deteriorated, and a structural collapse was not responsible for its closure. Looking around more at the exterior and deck, it's apparent that life is thriving here even years after its closure. Captain Stern of Slateport fame has a representative here looking for a scanner of some kind. Going below deck, the damage continues. We can see that what the nature preservation representative said is immediately true. There are numerous visitors exploring Mauville alongside us. Some say rare Pokémon live here, which is probably true given the environmental surveys. More on that later. The first door we see, room 1, is locked. The one below, room 2, is also locked. Across the hall, we are able to enter. Inside is a gentleman and a young couple who are looking around and treasure hunting, respectively. The informational NPC did mention that this place was left as is, and Captain Stern is aware of equipment that was left behind. So it is possible that something valuable still lies somewhere in Mauville. The lockers and shelves are filled with trash and debris, but there is a group photo on the wall. Most prominently, there appears to be a guy with an impressive mustache and stomach in the photo. Outside, in the hall, is someone who used to work here when he was a young man. He confirms Mauville was closed for the sake of Pokémon. Without access to the locked rooms, there's nothing left to do but dive here. Halfway to the next dive spot, there's a staircase going down where we can find the scanner. Marching onward, we surface on the other side. Entering this door, there's a feeling that we're being watched. Underneath the ragged bed is a magazine regarding unemployment, suggesting that maybe before its closure, the employees could see the writing on the wall. In this cabinet is an official statement of apology. A partial name, Cosmo, took responsibility for losing an odd keystone donated by the Orberg mine. That feeling of being watched returns, and on the next shelf is something called a Devon energy elixir made with refined Seviper extract, purported to be able to increase your focus and work output to the point you won't need a rest for days. That sounds sketchy. If you go to a menu that makes the screen darken, when you return, you find the odd keystone that guy lost. A Spiritomb inhabits it, and I would say that's a fairly rare Pokemon. Perhaps it wasn't whoever that guy was' fault for losing it, but he took responsibility regardless. If you're looking to catch it, come prepared, as it can feint itself with Memento. Outside the room and onward, we're stopped by a man who tells us his uncle informed him of extraordinary treasure hidden here. He asks us to let him know if we find anything. Given how it's been a while since Mauville was left to time and explorers, it makes me wonder if his uncle has an inside scoop. Perhaps he worked here and would know for a fact that whatever treasure he knows about still slumbers here. To his right is another room, an office with a high skitty doll in a dress. Probably not the treasure everyone is looking for. Across from that bookcase is another with payments and invoices with another partial name. There are common letters in the surname, and combining what we have gives us the name Cosmo. That's a surname that we ought to be familiar with. Professor Cosmo is a meteorite researcher based in Falarbor Town who we meet when Team Aqua or Magma trick him at Meteor Falls. Whether or not he's Raizo, though, is presently unclear. To the right of the invoices are a series of letters. They read as follows. Dear Daddy, how are you? Are you working really hard? I'm doing well. I'm doing all my homework, and I'm helping at home too. Mommy's working hard and makes us dinner every night. Do you have to work this weekend? Are you going to come home? If you come home, take me to see the star show, okay? Takao Cosmo. P.S. I'm going to send you the picture I drew at the trainer's school. The second looked like another letter, but it's a drawing. The drawing is of a boy's face, and written next to it are the words, I love you, Daddy. Dear Daddy, how are you? Are you working really hard? I was sad that you didn't come last weekend, but Mommy didn't seem so sad. She went out with her friend. I finally got that telescope that I've been wanting. It was from you, wasn't it? Thanks, Daddy. I really wanted it. I like looking at the sky, Daddy. When I look at the stars, I wonder if you're looking at the same stars too. Let's look at the stars together next time you come home. Takao Cosmo. Dear Daddy, how are you? You aren't working too hard, are you? You never come home anymore. I'm worried if you're okay. Mommy goes out with her friends a lot. It seems like fun, so I guess she's doing okay. The Shelgon that you gave me evolved the other day, but I liked it better when it was a Shelgon and it looks like a meteorite. Salamence was kind of a letdown, so I asked a friend to trade it for his Soul Rock. I'm sorry, Daddy. I know it was a present, but I think Soul Rock is cooler. When it gets dark tonight, I'm going to look at the stars again. I'll think of you when I do. Takao Cosmo. Dear Daddy, I was really happy to get to meet you the other day. It was so fun playing together again and going to see the star show too, even if it was just the two of us. It was sad that Mommy couldn't go, and even more sad when you and Mommy fought that night. I'll study hard, just like you told me, and I'll be a good boy, so don't fight. But let me keep watching the stars, even if I have to do all my homework too. When I grow up, I want to be a professor and study the stars. Takao Cosmo. It would appear that the author of these letters, Takao Cosmo, is likely Professor Cosmo, making Raizo, the recipient, his father. He also mentioned a star show, and the only other time a star show in Hoenn is explicitly mentioned is the Lit-Leonid meteor shower that the player watches in the postgame. If the star show mentioned in this letter is the Lit-Leonid meteor shower, which appears once every 11 years, that would mean that however long ago C. Mauville was decommissioned was at least that long ago. Professor Cosmo was a boy when he wrote these letters, and he's got gray hair now. We'll discuss how long ago this likely was once we've finished exploring. 6th. Dear Daddy, thank you for writing to me. I'm doing really well here, so please don't worry about me. I hope I'll see you again someday. I dream about it all the time. I brought the telescope you bought me to our new house. Please don't work too hard, Daddy. I hope you're okay. I will always, always love the stars, and I will always, always love you. To Cow Cosmo. P.S. I'll give you my Hi Skitty doll. Please take care of it for me. It looked like another letter, but it's a photo. There's a little boy holding a telescope, with a woman beside him, looking bored. To summarize, Raizo spent a lot of time away from home, which likely caused tension with his wife and son. Further down the hall are 2 more locked doors and more rumors of treasure. There are 2 tubers, one of which shares a rumor that C. Mauville was intended to gather energy. The other tuber found a key and gives it to us. It opens that first locked door back on the other side. We get the key to room 2 inside, and no additional lore. Within room 2 is another photo of people in jumpsuits and lockers containing said jumpsuits. A curious note details how Captain Stern invited both the writer and Doc to work at his shipyard after C. Mauville's date of closure was announced. Interestingly, it mentions how Doc did a dirty job. Next to it is the company song. The daybreak shines on Route 108. Wake up our towering fort. For the bright future Hoenn, we won't take our days off. The bright light shines on Route 108. Intensely shiny our fort. Swear your selfless devotion. Unionization is out of the question? Dig through, dig out great energy. Darkness descends on Route 108. Tonight again sleepless our fort. Drive away our competitors. We won't take our overtime pay? Dig through, dig out great energy. So their company song denies a right to unionization and overtime pay. Raizo's invoice did include overtime reimbursement. It's at this point that one questions just exactly what the Greater Mauville Holdings Company was up to here at C. Mauville. The employees appear overworked and underpaid, needing to rely on Viper extract stimulants while not seeing their families. And for an employee to do a dirty job? There are confidential reports in the bottom right corner that differ in their deterioration between versions, allowing us to combine the two for a complete message. Devon's secret investigation report. The development on new energy turned out to be true. The energy that uses Pokemon's bioenergy is called Infinity Energy. That is what fueled the ultimate weapon in the Kalos region. It appears that Devon Corporation was researching it, and representatives of Greater Mauville Holdings performed corporate espionage to confirm rumors about it. Later on in the Delta episode, we learn that yes, Infinity Energy is what Devon owes their success to. The second report is a bit more personal to Mauville. Investigation report on Watson. A series of actions related to cancellation of the new Mauville project turned out to be true. I recommend prompt disciplinary action against him as a traitor to our group. Doc, Team E leader, operative group. It's unclear if Doc wrote both reports, but it would appear that Watson did something to New Mauville that Greater Mauville Holdings considered sabotage. The earlier letter seems to imply that by C. Mauville's closure, Doc lost his own loyalty in the company and perhaps sought to redeem himself in Slateport City, where we find him in modern-day Hoenn. As of right now, there's still no concrete indication of what Doc's dirty job was, or the identity of the other men who went to work for Captain Stern. It could be that Doc was a loyalty officer or corporate investigator, but that seems to not line up with his current work as a shipwright. A hidebound notebook, which is interesting because that would mean it was Pokemon leather, reads as follows. The damage caused by the cancellation of the New Mauville project has been catastrophic. As a member of the management, much of the blame and the debts will fall upon me, but that will be little consolation to the employees working under me who will lose their livelihoods. I couldn't do a thing for them. I'm a man with no power. Protecting nature and Pokemon and the environment It's great as an idea, it's a fine ideal to aspire to, and Watson is a great man for dreaming of it all, but cruel reality and the organization that I must try to preserve have dashed those dreams. I couldn't do a thing for him. I'm a man with no power. It would seem that Watson led the push for the preservation of nature and Pokémon that led to C. Mauville being shuttered. Somehow, he blew the whistle on New Mauville, which caused C. Mauville to become unprofitable as a venture. Clippings to the left of that letter detail headlines about Greater Mauville Holdings and how Watson was the project leader of New Mauville. It seems he was the only one willing to talk about the problems plaguing the projects. I'm not sure how the author of this notebook failed Watson, however. This room connects to the outside, and a fisherman caught the key to room 4. The storage room is also out here, so we'll keep that in mind. In room 4, we find Stern's employee ID, further roping him into the story of C. Mauville and complicating the timeline a little bit. We've touched on how long ago C. Mauville may have been shuttered, but how long was it in operation? For Stern to have been an employee that then went on to establish a shipyard and offer jobs to former co-workers, it must have been quite some time. We find the 389th company newsletter just below Stern's ID, with no concrete indication of how often that publication ran. I think one of the obscured words is annual, but I seriously doubt C. Mauville existed for 400 years. Weekly seems reasonable though. That would be about 7 years of newsletters. Daily seems too few, and monthly excessive. It describes Cap'n Salty, an employee who won a monthly slogan competition with "Don't dirty the seas with pollution and dumping, dirty your uniform with sweat and hard work." He won a Rhyperior with a rocky helmet for coming up with that. We find the storage key and can return to unlock it outside. The man who told us about his uncle and the treasure meets us as soon as we open it, and he quickly becomes amazed at just how many nuggets are inside. Within these Pokeballs are 8 nuggets and 4 big nuggets, among some other goodies. Then Raizo himself appears and reveals the treasure he told his nephew about was a high skitty doll named after Takao, his son. Then they're gone. Just like that, we've met Professor Cosmo's father and cousin with little fanfare. On our way out, we can check out C. Mauville's 10 slogans. Say good morning very loudly. Don't bring Pokemon to your workplace. Always arrive on time, always stay late. Lay your life on the line in safety checks. Take joint responsibility for teamwork. Obey your superior's orders absolutely. Maintain top quality, give up your sanity. Worship and praise the founder. Don't expect time off before you retire. No need to think, just work unceasingly. And that is pretty much the extent of what we can learn about C. Mauville from the place itself. Let's track down some of the old employees, first by visiting Captain Stern's shipyard in Slateport City. Doc has nothing to say about C. Mauville and appears to be quite successful. He's helping to design the SS title when we meet him. Upstairs is another C. Mauville alumnus. I wonder if he's the one who wrote the letter mentioning Doc had been recruited by Stern. He says that recently he ran into a subordinate of his who lost an odd keystone back in the day. That sounds like Raizo, and apparently he's doing well for himself career-wise. Between searching the wreck of his old workplace for a doll and apologizing for something that happened a long time ago though, it seems he might be a bit stuck in the past. Stern, by the time we can deliver the scanner, is at the Slateport ferry terminal. He exchanges the scanner for a title or clear bell and recounts a story of his time at C. Mauville. A male relative of the kimono girls who worked under him gave it to him. Stern doesn't spend much more time than that reminiscing about C. Mauville, and he's obviously quite a successful man. He has a shipyard pumping out cutting-edge submarines and ferries. Well, there's only one other former Greater Mauville Holdings veteran that we know the identity of at this point, so let's head to Mauville City to sniff around for more lore. Mauville City is located in the middle of the Hoenn region. It's the only city in the entire region where you can leave in every cardinal direction, and it's close to a major port. These are part of the ingredients that led to its success. In the Generation 3 continuity, that success is more quiet. There's a humble quality to it. In the Gen 6 continuity, the success of Mauville City is far more grand and consumeristic. That is one thing that immediately stands out about Mauville City when you compare its depictions across generations. They are completely different. On one hand, you have what is essentially a fenced-in village in a grassy field. On the other, you have a multi-level mall with dozens of attractions. The in-universe plan was for the Gen 3 depiction to closely match the Gen 6 one, but plans fell through in that universe. I explored most of the city in my video on malls in the Pokémon series, so check that out for a more in-depth look. For this video, we'll only be checking stuff out that's relevant to Greater Mauville Holdings. Immediately in the town square, we meet a man who informs us that all that remains of the company in the modern day is the name Mauville. Every one of Greater Mauville Holdings' projects that we know about contains the name Mauville. One of the slogans at Mauville was to worship and praise the founder, so I wonder if that was their name. As far as I know, there was no one explicitly stated to be the head of the company. The closest we get is that man with no power who was part of management. Up on the roof, an old man who worked at Mauville ages and ages ago recounts the story of how he had to fire an employee for making a mess of things. At least one letter came for him after he had been fired. He presumably never told his family about it, and they never knew what happened to him. That sounds like it could be Raizo to me. I wonder if he just disappeared from his family's lives after the business at Mauville. The only thing we know about Raizo is that he is alive, and a person who lost the odd keystone is now doing well for himself. But a person who would go to such lengths to retrieve a doll named after his son and apologize to it? Maybe he has money, but he doesn't read as fulfilled to me. Something tells me that Takao didn't really have his father. Not even after Mauville was shuttered. People grow apart, and sometimes the damage is too far done. I am with this old man. The story of Mauville is making my heart ache. Heading up to the Mauville Hill apartments, we can read a curious nameplate on apartment 11, Home of a Powerless Man. That sounds familiar. If we enter, we meet a man with no power. He looks awful young, but that's a very unique phrase. As we'll talk about later, Mauville's timeline and the ages of its employees are a little bit funky. I see no reason why this guy isn't somehow tied to Mauville. We can actually give him some power. There are 5 old guys in the Mauville Pokémon Center that come and go as you progress through the game. They end up in the apartment across from 11 after you interact with them, and when all 5 are present, they begin to search for someone to share their power with. Speaking to the powerless man after this point convinces him to come over to apartment 3, where the old men pass down their power to him and transform him into Mr. Bonding. This exploration is taking us to places I couldn't have predicted. After that, he takes off, and there's only one more ex-employee that we can interact with. Watson can be found in the central plaza after the player deals with Kyogre or Groudon. He's looking at Square Tower, a beacon that serves as an all-clear signal to New Mauville. It's glowing brightly, which means something is amiss. He invites us to his apartment to discuss the details of what it is he wants us to do. In apartment 13, he entrusts us with activating the computer in New Mauville to ensure everything is alright. Before leaving, if we go over here, we meet Watson's wife. Before completion of New Mauville is the only time she mentions that. She is really young. Or is she? More on that later. Heading to New Mauville to check on the computer is as easy as pie. Its map description mentions that it extends for 99 floors below the surface, implying that it was quite developed by the time Watson turned whistleblower. That he checks on it after all this time is noble of Watson. Unfortunately, we can only explore the uppermost floor to interact with the central computer. Maybe that's for the best, though. Underground facilities are kind of scary, especially if they're that deep and left to time. When we return, Watson is relieved to find no abnormalities. The all-clear likely had something to do with how New Mauville has been left to rot. It was intended to be an entirely subterranean city. Speaking to Watson's wife further muddies the timeline, as it appears she also worked on it. She likely isn't as young as she appears. She mentions that the project was nearly completed when it was discovered that human habitation would have a negative effect on the Pokémon who had begun to live at New Mauville. That's basically all the information we get to piece together the history of Greater Mauville Holdings within Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Traveling to Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, we can learn a great deal about the impact Greater Mauville Holdings had on the world by taking note of what it did not accomplish in Generation 3. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald take place in explicitly separate continuities from Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. The Delta episode hammers this point over your head with how the original plan to get rid of the meteor containing Deoxys was to send it to another version of Hoenn. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon's Rainbow Rocket episodes solidify this by allowing us to encounter the original depictions of Archie and Maxie. The biggest difference between continuities, from which most lesser differences spawn, is the lack of the presence or discovery of infinity energy. There's no readily available knowledge of Mega Pokémon, and AZ never conceived of or fired his ultimate weapon. That is, assuming that what Zinnia said is both true and alluding to Ruby Sapphire and Emerald. So what exists relating to Mauville in a world without the advances of harvestable bioenergy? Mauville City and New Mauville. See, Mauville does not appear to exist. Instead, taking its place is the wreck of the SS Cactus. Greater Mauville Holdings has no mentions, but its existence is at least implied by how its projects' names are derived from the company's name in the Gen 6 continuity. This lack of a mention of the company's history in Generation 3 implies two possibilities to me when taken at face value. Either Mauville was the name of the founder, and they were far less prolific in Generation 3, maybe only aspiring to local politics, or Greater Mauville Holdings just faded into obscurity. I think that in Generation 6, why we hear about the company at all is because of how catastrophic their failure was. Perhaps in Generation 3 they developed the city a little bit, and then just fizzled out. There was no environmental survey, no collapse. After all, it's the successful or infamous companies we tend to hear about, not the ones that quietly fail or keep their noses clean. Maybe Greater Mauville Holdings is still around and it's just moved on to different ventures. At the end of the day though, Greater Mauville Holdings was invented for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and any attempt to connect it back to Generation 3 is pure speculation. Regardless, success never came to Mauville City in Generation 3. The first thing Watson tells us when we meet him is that he's given up his plans to convert Mauville City to something like his gym, instead devoting his resources to its puzzle. When he sends us to New Mauville, it's a small facility with a generator, described as an underground sector of Mauville City itself. The reach of Mauville and its footprint are enormously smaller than in Generation 6. Something about the mismatch in Mauville City's depictions fills me with a very unserious dread. I think that's why I'm so drawn to Mauville City and to Watson. He's one of my favorite characters. On the surface, comparing the two Watsons is sad. One, as far as we know, never rose beyond small-time engineering in a sleepy little town. The other has a storied past as a project lead and advocate for Pokémon on top of his mechanical achievements. Both of them had bumpy paths to get where they are, and they're both the gym leader of Mauville City, and they both appear to be really happy. On the surface, they mirror each other, but digging deeper, Watson was always going to find fulfillment. He's a character with a good heart. Instead, I think another character better serves as Watson's foil. Raizo Cosmo. Doc and Stern moved on to better things. The man with no power, if he even is the same guy, becomes something entirely new. Watson's wife we just don't know enough about. Watson and Raizo are the only two Mauville alumni we meet who have really carried their experiences into the rest of their lives. Watson demonstrates a deep commitment to the betterment of the world around him, likely influenced by his experiences with Greater Mauville Holdings. Raizo Cosmo was a coward, who to this day is stuck in the past, searching for old memories instead of reconnecting with his son, and apologizing for things that just don't matter. They represent the choices available to us when it comes to bringing our failures along with us. Do we learn from them and commit to making them no longer, or do we obsess over them and keep them alive by clinging to them? So we've traveled all over the Hoenn region to piece together this story, and what have we found out? Greater Mauville Holdings is a now defunct company only survived by the name Mauville. It had 3 projects that we know about, of which only Mauville City ended up successful. I'd wager it was the first, and C Mauville and New Mauville were the company getting greedy and overexpanding. Devon Corporation was likely a rival, considering how Greater Mauville Holdings was investigating its corporate secrets. On that note, Greater Mauville Holdings was up to all sorts of shady dealings, including making its employees work around the clock without proper payment or advocacy in the form of unionization. C Mauville existed to extract resources and energy from the sea, but was later closed down for the sake of the environment. New Mauville was intended to be an entirely subterranean city. It appears that Watson, the leader of the New Mauville project, turned traitor and got New Mauville shut down just before its completion, which led to scrutiny of C Mauville. Most of the employees we get to meet end up doing well for themselves, at least in their careers. Some lost their families, and others are filled with bittersweet memories of their youths toiling away for Greater Mauville Holdings. The timeline of Greater Mauville Holdings is rather fuzzy. We do not get concrete numbers for how long it operated or when it closed down. The closest hints we get are that there were at least 389 See Mauville newsletters, and that a star show that comes around every 11 years was at one point maybe mentioned in letters of indeterminate age. Comparing the appearances of the ex-employees and their children makes it even fuzzier. Watson's wife and the man with no power appear younger than even Rizo's son. Literally any number of years is a shot in the dark, but it was probably around a multiple of 11 years prior to the events of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I think somewhere around 25-ish, maybe 30 years is about appropriate. That kind of accounts for Rizo being let go before the closure, and works with the ages of the alumni, assuming Takao Cosmo went gray early, and everyone else aged really gracefully. The story Game Freak told about Greater Mauville Holdings is profound, especially for the target audience of children. It perfectly exemplifies the kind of dad lore that we all hear about growing up, learning a little at a time about the world before we existed. We can never truly know it. Just the curated memories chosen to be shared with us. And that's why I think we don't need concrete dates and events, or even perspectives. Greater Mauville Holdings isn't that kind of story. It's shared a little at a time from the survivors, and they have had a lot of time to think about it. One day, we too will share our stories with the next generation. You may be living through the next Greater Mauville Holdings, and you just don't know it. The natural question that may come to mind then is, what will we remember? But I think a better one is, how will we remember it? Will we take the mistakes and add them to our knowledge like Watson? Or will we chase regrets into old age like Rizo? That's what I take from all this, and I hope to bestow it to you. Thank you for reaching the end of this video. I've been the Sludge King, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider leaving a like, a subscribe, or a comment describing what worked or didn't about this video. I've been wanting to talk about Mauville since my Abandoned Areas video, and I'm actually still not done with it. One day, I'd like to revisit and explore all the apartments. If you'd like to see this, or any other topic, please let me know down below. If you'll excuse me though, I need to be a bit more mindful about living in the present. Thanks, Daddy. I really, really wanted it. Department stores and malls are dying. That's probably something you've heard, even if you haven't seen it for yourself. There are many reasons that are often cited for this decline, like the rise of e-commerce and the internet, and the impending death of the middle class. But I want to present an indicator that's a little less apparent than that. They're disappearing from the Pokémon games too, not just the real world. We haven't seen a new one in a game in almost a decade. When I realized that, my fragile childhood whimsy that I only just regenerated this past holiday season started shriveling up all over again. Then I got more introspective, and I realized that the original decline of my childhood whimsy also related to malls. I've got a personal stake in the topic of malls and department stores in Pokémon now. You see, when I was a teenager, I visited the mall I would go to in my childhood after almost a decade of not living in the area. Comparing it to the image in my mind, it had really lost its luster. The warm and bright Christmas decorations from my recollection were gone. They barely splurged for wreaths, and the mall felt so cold. It was as if the mall had died. That was when I really started to become aware of change. I mean, I knew that things did. I lived through the change of the seasons many times, but that was when I really knew. Sometimes change can be so gradual you barely notice it's happening, but other times, change happens in your absence, and so a return seems sudden, and that was the foundation of my realization. But Pokemon games don't change, not really. Once a title is out there, everything that's possible within them is more or less possible. That's why I like returning to them, and other pieces of media. I change, and they don't. I can leave and then come back with all my new life experiences and have a new experience with an old game. And that's precisely what I'll do in this video. I'll be going to the department stores and malls in the Pokemon games, areas that I historically overlooked, with a renewed sense of interest born out of the melancholy I feel toward the decline of malls and department stores in our world. This topic has been suggested to me a few times, but it was this comment that really made me decide to take a closer look. So, thank you. Without further ado though, let's dive right in. The department stores and malls of the Pokemon world have a few things in common no matter where you go. Even if the buildings aren't separated by loading zones, they're all multi-floor, which is pretty true to life. They have similar layouts too, more or less. You can count on a floor that sells similar items to the Pokemarts along your journey. Usually, it's on the first floor, or the second if the first floor is only a reception area. Then there are floors where you can buy the stat drinks, some TMs, and X items. What else you can find in each one depends on the generation, but you can usually count on gimmicky game-exclusive items such as poffins, costumes, and base furniture. Kanto's department store is the only one you're required to visit. Sort of. Technically, you haven't needed to since Fire Red and Leaf Green, but originally, the gate guards preventing you from entering Saffron City required an ordinary fresh water, lemonade, or soda pop. It was only in the remakes, when held items could potentially break progression, that their thirst could only be quenched with the tea you can get from the condominiums. Before then, you needed to visit the department store's roof to get them a drink. That's another constant, by the way. They usually have vending machines at the top. While we're on the topic of Celadon City's department store, let's start there. Floor 1 is your standard fare. It's a typical reception area that a few other stores in the Pokemon world share. Floor 2 is where it kind of gets interesting. In addition to the normal offerings I mentioned earlier, there are TMs available for purchase. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee's selection is much better than the Gen 1 and 3 depictions. You can expect moves like Mega Punch and Brick Break in the original continuities, which can leave a little bit to be desired. In Let's Go, moves including Shadow Ball and Hyper Beam can be found. This is to be expected though. The original games have a sort of soft philosophy revolving around elemental moves. Playing Red, Blue, and Yellow, it's apparent that moves that aren't normal type are meant to be more special. Each of the types have only a handful of moves compared to the normal type's whopping 74. Second place was Psychic with 15 moves, but only 5 of them can do damage. It was more or less intended that you would run with all normal type moves and then have 1 or 2 special elemental moves on Pokemon. This concept was dead in the dirt by the time even Fire Red and Leaf Green came around 2 generations later, and I recall it being odd to my child self that so many move tutors taught normal type attacks. Why would I put the normal type Mega Punch on my Charizard when I could give it the awesome Dragon Claw? Now, it's not too terribly crazy for a Pokemon to be kitted out with 4 moves of differing types to cover all sorts of foes. Normal type moves are almost too normal in an era where neutral damage is scoffed at. This change in design philosophy is exemplified by the small gesture of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee altering this counter. Fire Red and Leaf Green were a departure from the philosophy of the originals as well, just in different ways. The second floor also houses an employee in Fire Red and Leaf Green who mentions that Lance comes here often enough to purchase capes that it's worth mentioning. That tidbit goes into the fame checker. Floor 3 sells nothing to the player. Instead, there are various TVs and consoles depicting various genres of video games and movies. The posters are reflective of the games they appear in. Fire Red and Leaf Green have themed promotional material, and so does Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. In the latter, though, it's more interesting. It's a 3D world, and there's more detail required to make it look lived in. I really like these quest-style posters on some of the tables. We learn here that the player character's dad likes sports. Does yours? The NPCs here are the real reason to visit, though. The person at the counter claims to have finished Pokemon. With consistent areas like Regional Game Freak headquarters, sometimes the games can be a little self-referential. It's just part of Pokemon's identity and sense of humor. In the originals, they were less subtle about it. In Gen 7, he's not nearly as mysterious and gives you Helping Hand instead. The rest of the NPCs here have dialogue regarding trading. The lone trainers teach the player about trainer IDs and original trainers. The pair in the center serve as a valuable hint for those having trouble filling out their Pokedexes. They just finished a trade in which a Haunter evolved into Gengar, and the so-called Haunter collector had no idea that would happen. He's truly a contender for Pokemon's biggest fraud. This tidbit about trade evolution is actually a recurring hint in department stores and malls. Most of them have a hint regarding a trait evolution. Comment down below with the Pokemon you think are mentioned later on. I'll be sure to point them out so you can compare. Floor 4 houses Wiseman Gifts, styled Wise Man Gifts in Gen 3 only. If you played Fire Red and Leaf Green but not Red, Blue, and Yellow, this floor is probably the main reason you visited the Celadon department store. This is where you're able to purchase the Evolution Stones, save for the Moonstone. In Let's Go, they even added the Ice Stone. Even if I wasn't using a Pokemon that needed it, I would come and buy one of each. I still do that in playthroughs. Old habits die hard. This boy heard something useful about another item you can purchase here, the Pokédoll. There is something special about this item that makes this NPC's statement seem meta. In Gen 1 only, you can skip getting the Sylph Scope by utilizing a Pokédoll on the ghosts inhabiting Pokemon Tower. Any of them, including the ghost of Cubone's mother, Marowak, who stops you before reaching the top. The ghost flees, and you're able to coast on by without putting its spirit to rest. This is the only place to purchase a Pokédoll. There's also a trainer here who's buying a Pokédoll for his girlfriend, but in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, he's instead buying a... oh no. Floor 5 is a drugstore that sells the X items and stat-boosting vitamin drinks. It has the typical NPCs who tell you a bit about those items, but not enough to efficiently use them. That's par for the course anytime you can find these being sold. If you actually want to utilize them effectively, the game provides little help in doing that. In Generation 7, the floor is dedicated to accessories for your partner Pikachu or Eevee, as the stat items don't exist. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee uses a different stat XP system. The boutique is like a pop-up shop with folding tables and chairs, which suggests to me that this floor could be a temporary event space, and in-universe, it's supposed to change. The 6th area is the rooftop square. The vending machines are the focus. You're able to buy one of each and give them to the little girl here, who's a trainer, for 3 TMs. They differ by generation, but they're all really good. She's so thirsty, she'll just give you the screens. It's remarkable. Her brother calls her out as being entitled, but she compensates you and then some for the drink. You're probably aware there's a small chance of receiving an additional drink, but did you know that the chance differs across the generations, and that you can receive up to 3 in some cases? In Generations 3 and 4, the chance for an extra drink is 1 in 64. In Gen 5, it was lowered to 1 in 32, and there's a medal for it in Black and White too. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire only, there's a chance you get an additional drink. That's it for the original depictions, so why don't we stop by a few years later to see it in the context of the Johto games. It's much the same in terms of available products, but there are minor changes that I'll address as we go on. Most significantly in the reception area, we learned that the Celadon department store is part of the same chain as the Goldenrod department store. Both of them were recently renovated, so any dissimilarities to the earlier depictions layout can be waved away by that statement. The second floor has the typical goods. Crasher Wake from the Sinnoh region is here during your first visit in the remakes, and he gives you Sinnoh starter masks for dress-up. By the way, if you never noticed, all Gen 4 games use Diamond and Pearl sprites for dress-up opportunities in order to maintain compatibility. Next to the Crasher is the son whose father is just now becoming a trainer. He's having trouble learning the basics, which, as someone whose mother got big into Pokemon Go, I can relate. TMs are no longer available on the second floor. Instead, they've been consolidated on the third floor. Their selection is decent. The electronics shop's goods are nowhere to be seen, but there is still a pair of trading trainers. Any guesses as to what they give you a hint about? Porygon 2. In this case, the boy on the left is aware of that, and he acknowledges that he forgot to remove the upgrade before trading. I wonder if that implies that this boy stores items necessary for evolution on his Pokemon. The upgrade has no battle effects after all. Floor 4 is still Wiseman Gifts, but it seems that they've run out of the evolution items. Instead, they just sell mail. There's a nerd by the escalator who's excited that they now carry tunnel mail, which according to him was previously only available in Violet City in the Johto region. Faulkner and Janine can be found between the shelves on Mondays. They're arguing over who has the better father. All we know about Faulkner's father is that he used to be the gym leader before Faulkner. Janine's father is Koga, who currently serves as one of the Elite Four. I have to give it to Janine by default, but Faulkner talks in circles until you agree with him, at which point he gives you his number to set up rematches. Sometimes, when he calls you, he complains about how Janine goes on endlessly about her dad, which is rich because almost every time you talk with him, he mentions his dad. When you fight him the first time, when you meet him here, when he calls you, it's all about his dad, who may have died? He talks about inheriting the gym and using his dad's bird Pokemon, but then if you decline his offer to take a picture, he says he'll just take one with his dad. And I know what you might be thinking. It's possible to inherit something from your dad while he's alive, right? There's actually an interaction with him at the Pokemon World Tournament where prior to battling him in the final round, he says, "I'll show you the real power of magnificent bird Pokemon. Dad, I hope you're watching me battle from above." Okay, maybe that's just a weird bird trainer way of saying he hopes his alive father is proud of him, but I'm really leaning toward him being dead. This line is repeated in an interaction in Pokemon Masters EX that's based on the original interaction between Faulkner and Janine. Yeah, that's right, made you forget you're watching a video about malls, didn't I? So anyway, Faulkner's dad, probably dead, but maybe not? Weird mystery. Floor 5 still sells battle items, and there's a gentleman here who acknowledges their high price. I don't mean to get editorial, but you really should just EV train instead of buying vitamins. If you care about invisible stat points, just go all in on learning. In these games, you can't even use the vitamins to take a stat to its max. but I digest. The rooftop is no longer a rooftop. Presumably, as part of the renovations, they put a roof over the roof. The new 6th floor still serves the same purpose as the original rooftop, but now it makes more sense that you can't just fly away from here. One of the most profound quotes in all of Pokemon is said right in front of this vending machine. Happiness does not come from how much things are worth. It is up to the heart of the one to receive it. I have to say I agree. I have cheap objects that mean much more to me than something with a high price tag. And that's where we leave off on the Celadon department store. It was the first and started a long tradition of specialty shopping in Pokemon games. It's had by far the most appearances, showing up anytime Kanto is visited within the games. That's 13 times if you count all the versions separately. It still beats the rest even if you don't, but it certainly sounds like a more impressive number. I always look forward to getting to Celadon whenever I play a Kanto game. Between the department store and the game corner, there are a lot of things to explore within the city, and the mall is a good place to start. Goldenrod City's department store is part of the same chain as Celadon's, as we learned, and it shows. They sell more or less the same sort of stuff. I only mention this because Celadon and Goldenrod are accessible in the Johto games. It's a ready comparison to make. Floor 1 is reception, and Floor 2 is trainer items. I find it funny that this guy says the selection is unmatched because a near identical one is just across Mount Silver, and pretty much every region has a similar one. He must not get out much. The battle items have been split into 2 floors this time around, with the X items on Floor 3 and the stat drinks on Floor 4. I don't understand why this was done, as they share a floor in every single other game. Maybe it's because they wanted to establish a split between a temporary and a permanent item? I have seen on a used file someone who appeared to be under the impression that the X items were held items. But in a post-game area, Celadon, they share a floor again, as we just established. Weird. There's no Wise Man Gifts analog because of this split, but some mail is available on the lower floors as a trade-off. The trainers on 3 and 4 both espouse the usual comments that aren't helpful at all to someone looking to get into EV training. The Token Trade Evolution NPC is in the top left corner of Floor 4. Any guesses as to what he tells you about? That's right. Machoke, Kadabra, Haunter, and Graveler. He mentions more than any other NPC who does this in a department store. Floor 5 sells TMs, and useful ones to boot. The third gym is here in Goldenrod, and you have the opportunity to get some strong moves for the rest of the game if you have the cash. Celadon department store is available after the second badge in Kanto, but getting there is a little less straightforward than getting to Goldenrod. Not to mention, the TMs in Goldenrod are way more useful. Between the precocious Dratini you can obtain at the game corner and the selection here, Heart Gold and Soul Silver really kit the player out for the rest of the game. It's really only money that can set you back. This is also where you can obtain the traded match op from the man to the left, which is a way to counter Whitney's infamous Miltank. Don't forget that it has Scrappy and a Lumberry in addition to a speed stat tied with Salamence though. Floor 6 is the rooftop atrium. The sky is not visible, and it's comparable to the top of Celadon's remodeled department store. Speaking of Whitney, this is where you can find her to register her Pokegear number for rematches. Vending machines can be found here, in addition to a daily lotto corner in Generation 4. Third prize is a random berry. The second and first prizes are day-dependent, with Pokeballs and TMs of varying usefulness being available. It's completely random, and you have a 10% chance to get the best items. This is in contrast to practically every other lotto corner, which goes off of the TID of your Pokemon. In Crystal only, there's another staircase that leads to a true rooftop. However, there's nothing of importance up there. On the flip side, there's a basement accessible via the elevator. It's a warehouse that isn't available to customers. The nice attendant lets us down there anyway though. You can find a decent array of items down here while bothering the workers, most significant of which is the amulet coin. By the way, the department store is connected to the underground tunnel system that runs through Goldenrod. It's kind of weird. Goldenrod department store is a great place to gear yourself up in Johto. I find myself coming back here often as I get more money in order to make my team stronger. I don't really return as often to the others, which I think says a lot about the quality of this one. Not only is the selection good, it's in a really good spot. Lily Cove City houses the third department store featured in the Pokemon series. Floor 1 also houses a lottery corner, although technically it was Lily Cove that was first. The Goldenrod Lotto is only available in the remakes, which came after Ruby Sapphire and Emerald. This time, rather than it being completely random, it's an ID matching lotto, which is the standard when it comes to lotto corners. In other words, this is one of the ones where you stand to win a Master Ball. Floor 2 is again the same type of offerings as a regular mart. There's a man here who mentions wanting to stock up ahead of time for a long journey, which brings to mind an interesting thought. To me, department stores and malls are specialty shops. They're a place to visit only once in a blue moon or for something specific. It's not regular shopping. Where I'm from, shopping for consumable essentials isn't possible at the mall. I've never gone to a department store or mall to stock up on anything like toilet paper or Ziploc bags. I actually went to my local mall to try and at least locate a toothbrush for this section of the video, but I forgot that the Anchor store had closed permanently. Hot Topic didn't have one, so I was out of luck. It's just not feasible here. To my fellow Americans, it's not impossible for a mall or department store to have everything that someone needs. That usually happens in places far from us though. You know, like Japan, the country where Pokémon was created, or Canada, as my friend informed me. Being a resident of somewhere like Celadon or Lilycove or Japan, you could go your entire life only shopping at the department store. I just think it's interesting how a fictional world so alien to me has its roots in a place I could go to on this earth. Floor 3 is the stat item floor. Nothing new or notable is available here. Floor 4 is the TM floor, and again, nothing really worth writing home about. Floor 5 is the Hoenn gimmick floor, selling all sorts of furniture for your secret bases. Anybody who's into those probably knew that though. After the Delta episode, you can meet Tate and Liza, who are toy shopping with a man in black from the Space Center. Apparently, it was thought that their psychic powers could be useful for space travel, but they're too young to contribute thoughtfully. The last staircase leads to, again, a rooftop with vending machines. This was a brief section, and I think that's due to the transitional nature of Lilycove City. Like other cities without gyms, you more or less pass through the city on your way to more important things. Lilycove is the stepping off point for the water routes of the region, and there aren't ample opportunities to stop to smell roses. There's a rival battle after the Weather Institute one preceding Fortree. Your rival awaits you in front of the department store, and I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten that. It's the final one in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, which is odd. Their starter isn't fully evolved at this point. In the remakes, they changed that and added another fight after the credits. I only mention this because the department store is the scene of this final battle in the originals, and what a forgettable and anticlimactic climax it is. The handling of the rival is something Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire greatly improved upon. Which reminds me, we're not done with Hoenn. Mauville City is sort of a city, sort of a mall, in Gen 6 at least. The new and improved remake version of the city is a mostly enclosed, in-universe homage to Lumiose City, and the only remaining inhabited project started by Greater Mauville Holdings. The Gen 3 version of Watson aspired to have the city revamped into something like this, but it fell through just like New and C Mauville. The city is strikingly similar to the vision of the architect who first designed what we consider to be a modern shopping mall. Victor Gruen envisioned Southdale Mall in Minnesota to be a complete community, replete with living spaces and community amenities like a hospital and school. That didn't pan out in the case of Southdale Mall, but there are communities like this out there. Mauville City is a fictional example of this 1950s-style consumer utopia. The ground floor is all specialty shops, and it feels like a notably realistic offering. I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever been to a mall and gone to every shop. Malls typically have something for everyone, but not everything is for everyone. For example, many of the storefronts here are fronts for form changes. The Mirror Shop helps you obtain the Therian forms for Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus. So if you don't have Tornadus, Thundurus, or Landorus, there's no reason to come here. There are shops for mirrors, ribbons, bikes, a massage parlor, and a food court to name some. Mauville City is by far the most mall-like structure I've seen in any Pokémon game, at least to my American eyes. In terms of offerings exclusive to the Pokémon world, there are battle facilities, including the food court. In Mauville City, you have to fight to keep your seat and eat. It's exactly the kind of attraction that makes this world lived in. Of course the people would settle disputes about dibs with battling. The second floor is all apartments, and interestingly, the nameplates don't have names on them, with the exception of Watson's. Instead, they're descriptions of the residents, such as an ice cream lover's house, or home of the man who keeps an eye on the corridor. Mine would probably say, home of the man with the big spoon. Because they're not really part of the mall, I'll hold off on going through all of them. I would be interested in exploring them for another video, so if you want to hear about the weirdos of Mauville City, let me know down in the comments below. The rooftop returns, though again, this is a bit of an abstract department store. So whether or not it counts as the return of rooftops, who's to say? On it, we can meet various people taking it easy, a lot of whom have something saddening to say. It feels as though there's a disproportionate amount of the elderly here as well, which helps to solidify it as a mall in my mind. If you've been to a mall during the day in the United States, you've probably noticed the culture of mall walkers, old folks who walk around malls in groups to stay in shape. That's not just something Better Call Saul invented for anyone who's never seen it in the real world. It does happen. There's also a sense of regret over the entire city. There are a few working men on the roof who seem extremely dissatisfied with their lives. More old people means more years spent pondering what could have been. Watson is the most ready example of this. He was successful in upgrading Mauville, yes, but C and New Mauville were both left to rot in his time. I talked a little bit about this in my video on abandoned areas, so I recommend that if you want a taste of the squandered potential of Watson. We can also speak to someone who used to work with Watson, the one who laid off Professor Cosmo's father after he presumably damaged an odd keystone donated by the Orberg mine. He didn't tell his family he had been fired, and so letters postmarked after his departure kept on arriving. It's a rather sad tale, and I have plans to fully examine it and see Mauville one day. I actually get the idea that Mauville City is experiencing a slow death. The other two sites developed by Greater Mauville Holdings, C and New Mauville, went under. Disastrously in the case of C Mauville and quietly in the case of New Mauville. That company no longer exists, only the name Mauville, according to an NPC in the courtyard, but maybe it's just taking longer for the city to fade away. On the first floor, the game corner went out of business. The cafe has a man lamenting a lack of students at his dance studio. Rydell's Cycles only starts to do well with our intervention. Certain shops are noted as being ridiculously expensive. Certain ones only cater to trainers with a very small subset of Pokémon. Many of the citizens are older, and the younger ones are explicitly delinquents. A good portion of the apartments on the second floor are vacant, and at least one person is dissatisfied with his. I think the popping of Japan's 1980s economic bubble, which likely inspired such locations as the Kanto power plant, may have also inspired remake Mauville. Perhaps even the steady decline of Japan itself. It just so happens to also line up well with the decline of retail and malls here in the United States, which creates a compelling narrative when viewed through either lens. It's just a timeless universal thing, I guess. Declines have been happening since long before we humans kept written record. It's just an uncomfortable feeling to realize that you're in one. I greatly appreciate the effort put toward Mauville City and the other Mauvilles in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. When remakes change areas, I rarely have any complaints with them. The Hoenn remakes get a lot of flack, but I have nothing but praise for the revamped areas. Veilstone City houses the next department store. The first lady we talk to gives us a Sinnoh starter mask just like Crasher Wake in Celadon. This department store breaks convention by having salespeople on the ground floor. The Pokemart inventory that's traditionally sold on the second floor is available here. Like Goldenrod, Veilstone has a basement, though instead of a warehouse, produce and confectionaries can be bought here. To my understanding, this is a depochika, which is a staple of department stores in Japan. They're specialty food floors located in the basements of popular department stores in the wards of Tokyo. You can buy berries, poffins, and lava cookies here. The second floor is battle items, and there is something notable. This kid bought an HP up for his Kricketot. Yeesh. The customer service here is unmatched by the other stores. Someone notes it on the first floor. There are attendants who learn the names of regulars and offer recommendations in each department. TMs are one floor up, and the remake selection is much better. This guy has secrets he wants no one to know, yet he still writes them down. The evolution hint in Veilstone is Machamp. Yeah, Lily Cove didn't have one if you were wondering. The recommendations on this floor are actually pretty useful. The attendant can tell you about hidden mechanics such as Thunder's accuracy going up in the rain or Blizzard's in hail. The next floor is a gimmick floor selling secret base furniture like Lily Cove before it. The selection is much better than the originals because, as you might know, the Grand Underground of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl brought many changes with it. One of which is that secret bases can no longer be furnished with furniture. Instead, every placeable item is a statue or a pedestal you can place statues on. I was a big fan of the secret base mechanic, and the revamp to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire gave me hope for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Unfortunately, they just didn't go in that direction. The wide selection of available Pokemon, including Platinum exclusives though, was a neat change. The final floor is a rooftop square with vending machines once again. If it ain't broke, I guess. These buff guys standing side by side offer you a sticky barb. I have no problem with them whatsoever. If you hadn't gathered, there isn't a lot to say about Veilstone's department store. In terms of release order, this was the final traditional department store. From here on out, new department stores were more like malls, as we'll see, and then they transformed into something else before eventually petering out. This is where that started, and I can't blame them. It's not that necessary of a place, and as we've seen in Celadon, Goldenrod, and Lily Cove, there are only so many ways to depict a department store before they start blending together. Let's next go to where tradition first broke. Just like the games in which they reside, the Shopping Mall 9 is a departure from convention. There are no elevators or escalators, just stairs. The directory is instead just a kid trying to emulate the gym guy. It's called a shopping mall instead of a department store, it's not in a city, and it has no rooftop access. It's more of a big Pokemart rather than a department store or mall. You can buy basically everything you can find in every mart across the region, down to the regional mail and ball. In addition, you can find the stat items and a couple TMs. There's actually a trainer here who mentions coming here for their TM selection, but they only sell 2, no matter how long you wait. Hyper Beam and Giga Impact. It's odd, every other department store or mall has many more TMs regardless of their usefulness. It evokes the idea that this is a Poke Super Mart or something like that. There's a storeroom on the ground floor containing appliances for your Rotom. Because Gen 4 really kicked up legendaries having forms into overdrive, Gen 5 begins the tradition of implementing sometimes out-of-place means of obtaining said forms. Say what you will about the doing away of every Pokemon being able to be obtained in every game, but Alola really got bloated trying to accommodate every single Pokemon's form. The mall notably has trainers you can battle, which isn't seen anywhere else. They aren't strong or anything, but it's interesting. The public spaces that we inhabit would certainly become venues for battling in the Pokemon world. Prior to Black and White, battles were reserved for the wild and facilities. The Unova region started to lean into the idea that battles in this world could and do happen anywhere. Restaurants, shopping malls, the dentist. They tried something a little different in many ways when it came to the Unova region. Shopping Mall 9 was the end of the department store, really. After it, no new shopping center was devised in which you could buy a wide variety of items, including stat-raising items. They did do another mall, but it's pretty different than what came before. The last department store or mall that we saw was in Alola's Howley City. It's the one that really laid this tradition to rest for good. There isn't much to say about this place, especially because most of its amenities were sort of already represented by the revamped Mauville city. There's storefronts for tutored moves and legendary items here, and not much else. One thing of note though is that this stall is where you can obtain Magearna. If you never got one, I have good news for you. You can pause the video and scan the appropriate QR code on screen to get yourself one right now. Taken all together, the department stores and malls are like a game of telephone. They took elements of the ones that came before and swapped them out until we went from a shopping center containing all sorts of practical items and colorful characters to a building that's useful only to people with very specific Pokemon. Their inventories went from broad to specific over the course of 20 years or so, leading us to this point. We haven't seen a new one in about a decade. The department stores and malls in Pokemon games died a slow death, just like the tangible stores in our world. And that is what makes me feel so profoundly about them. Oftentimes, media can be an escape from all the worries and anxieties of life. Reading a good book or playing a good game can take you out of this reality with all your troubles. And then something small like the end of department stores being featured in the Pokemon games sneaks up on you. Your escape is no longer an escape. That's just life, I guess. Pokemon games and graveyards go together like Pokemon games and graveyards. Nary a generation has gone by that doesn't address where the people of each region lay their loved ones to rest. It's interesting to me that of all the world-building elements that have yet to be directly addressed, where the people go to pay their respects has been included since the very beginning. I guess you kind of have to if one of your elemental types is Ghost. Graveyards have always reminded me of Pokemon games, as silly as it sounds. They featured heavily in the games, and I remember passing by graveyards at night when I was a kid, wondering not if I would see ghosts, but ghost types. Imagine my shock when in 2016, Pokemon Go released, giving me an opportunity to catch Pokemon in the real world. I could walk by a cemetery and catch a Gengar from the sidewalk. That blew my mind. But there was a dark side to that. If you played Pokemon Go back around its release, I'm sure your local cemetery had a crisis with an influx of Pikachu-obsessed losers trampling graves. So what can we learn from the trainers of the Pokemon world about graveyard etiquette? Not a whole lot, actually. Most burial sites in Pokemon games also serve as battlegrounds. That's actually one of the more accurate parts of Pokemon Go. And that really got me thinking, is playing Pokemon Go in graveyards actually endorsed by the main games? Yes, to put it shortly. I personally am not down with it though. So I thought today that I would examine the graveyards of the Pokemon world and try to see what there is to learn about how the people inhabiting it treat their dearly departed. I hope to gain a greater appreciation of these staple locations and share some thoughts with you. Maybe along the way we'll find out the final resting places of some known characters. At the end, I'll talk about which ones are my favorite. I wonder if your favorite will be my favorite. Only one way to find out, and only one place to start. The Pokémon Tower is the first and probably most iconic Pokémon graveyard. Countless theories and creepypastas have been written up about the place. Lavender Town Syndrome and Buried Alive kept me and my siblings awake for countless nights as children. It's funny to look back on, but it's no wonder the place had rumors so plausible to a couple of kids. The place is creepy. Nearly everyone you meet in the tower is crazy. Almost all of them were possessed by spirits, and beating them in a Pokemon battle somehow breaks their trance. Confirmed to be resting here are a trainer's Clefairy and a Growlithe. There's a popular fan theory that the rival's Raticate is also resting here after losing its life aboard the SS Anne. I don't really subscribe to that theory though. I think it's way more likely that an elite trainer like the rival would just stop using Eradicate in favor of something stronger. When was the last time you brought a Route 1 rat to the mid-game or beyond? Until you get the Sylph Scope, all wild Pokemon show up as ghosts. Full stop. Ghosts, not ghost-type Pokemon. Yeah, in the Kanto games, ghost-type Pokemon are normally imperceptible, a convention quickly dropped by the second game. This brings up an interesting question. Are ghost-type Pokemon actually Pokemon, or are they ghosts? Is there a difference? Many ghost types are theorized to originate from deceased Pokemon and people. On the other hand, there are confirmed cases of the ghosts of people and Pokemon existing. What exactly determines the kind of life after death one experiences in the Pokemon world? Why do some come back as ghosts and others as ghost types? Me, when I pass, I hope I come back as a Rotom so I can live inside a Game Boy until I die again, because apparently ghost types can die. I'm not even going to try and reason that out. Apparently, it doesn't take long for ghosts to appear in the Pokemon world either. In the tower, we famously quiet the restless spirit of Cubone's mother, Marowak, one of the only instances of a straightforward loss of life in the Pokemon series. I believe that most of Pokemon Tower's paranormal activity stems from a reaction to Team Rocket making a mess of the place. Those possessed trainers I mentioned earlier have reactions after defeating them that lead me to believe most visits to Pokemon Tower are solemn and uneventful. By the time of the Johto games, when Pokemon Tower is converted into a radio tower and all the graves move to the House of Memories, nothing overtly paranormal occurs upon visiting. Your partner Pokemon can become a little unsettled, but nothing tries to attack you. I've heard sentiment that Pokemon Tower being converted to a radio tower has people upset, but I think moving the graves to a more secure location was a good call. It should have been done regardless of if the tower was repurposed. When the spirits got restless, innocents got hurt. It's a shame Team Rocket ruined so much and destroyed so many lives. But I think something like the mass possession in the Pokemon Tower would have happened eventually. It was only a matter of time. In my opinion, Team Rocket just happened to be the ones to tip the scales. It's better to have visitations in a more controlled area, and it seems Mr. Fuji is taking great care in protecting the remains and the people of Lavender Town. As far as burial grounds go, Memorial Pillar in the Sevi Islands is special. Unfortunately, there isn't much to say about it. It's a very tiny offshoot of Five Island that functionally only serves to get the player a metal coat for their Scyther or Onix. The Memorial Pillar is unique in that it's a solitary monument. It was erected in memory of a single, specific Onix named Tectonix. Its trainer keeps a constant vigil, and you can make an offering of Tectonix's favorite lemonade in exchange for TM42 Facade. It's a very quiet, beautiful little place, and I don't think nearly enough trainers have come here to explore and appreciate it. The next time you find yourself in the postgame of Fire Red and Leaf Green, bring a lemonade to pour one out for Tectonix. Mount Pyre is the next burial ground we visit as part of a main story. Smack dab in the middle of the Hoenn region, Mount Pyre erupts out of the ocean and serves not just as a memorial ground for Pokemon, but people too. That's uncommon as far as these places go. Usually, Pokemon are explicitly interred in their own dedicated spaces. Multiple trainers here, however, reference people important to them. Confirmed to reside here are a Zigzagoon and a Skitty. All but confirmed to reside here is this Black Belt's teacher and Phoebe's grandmother. None of the headstones are marked, except for this one in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. This gentleman is looking to make his future memorial for him and his Pokemon the best that it can be. Eventually, they will rest here eternally. I'm a little young to be thinking about buying a funeral plot for myself, but that doesn't mean I haven't pondered the concept. I was probably 10 when my grandparents mentioned buying their own spots. It struck me as odd to be thinking about what would happen in one's own unrealized future. It was about then that my thoughts about the future extended beyond when the next Pokemon game would come out. Things got a little more real. Then again, here I am talking about Mount Pyre. The most striking thing to me in Mount Pyre is how many regular people are here visiting. In other regions, it's mostly psychics and paranormal enthusiasts. In Hoenn, most trainers are regular people. Almost all of them have something interesting to say, whether it be about who they're paying respects to, or their general outlook on mortality. I'm glad they changed the layout of Mount Pyre for the remakes. In Gen 3, once you enter, plot is on the left, interesting NPCs on the right. In the remakes, they combine the paths and you have to interact with more trainers, which is great. These NPCs feel alive, in stark contrast to who they're mourning. Another standout feature of Mount Pyre is its Chimecho population. Chimecho is unique in that it's the lowest percentage encounter one can find in almost any Pokemon graveyard. It isn't a ghost type, obviously, but it is associated with the departed. Its design draws heavily upon wind chimes and charms meant to ward off spirits. Perhaps that's why there isn't anything strange afoot on Mount Pyre. Generation 3 also had a strange fascination with falling through floors to traverse dungeons. It's strange to me that such a sacred, high-traffic area has such lackluster upkeep. That really bothered me, but they did patch the holes in the floor for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. One thing they changed for the remakes that I didn't like so much was removing a small cutscene in the post-game. In this cutscene, the evil team leaders return the red and blue orbs. I understand why they couldn't though, seeing as they function as Megastones. Even though Archie and Maxie do express remorse for their actions, personally returning something like the red and blue orbs was such a nice touch. Everyone who goes to Mount Pyre behaves reverently for the most part. You know, barring brawling on crypts. The Lost Tower of Sinnoh is a place that really flops in Diamond and Pearl. The decor evokes feelings of a baby vampire's playroom. I don't know what they were thinking with this floor and wallpaper combo. Certainly not Burial Ground. Thankfully they changed it for Platinum and solidified the vibe, just like they did with Eterna Forest and Fantina's Gym, among others. One of its biggest positive points for me is that it's practically across the street from Sinnoh's daycare. That juxtaposition of life and death gets a thumbs up from me. In terms of what you can do with the Lost Tower though, not much. In Diamond and Pearl, you climb the tower for HMO4, Strength, but in Platinum, you get the cleanse and spell tags for using Defog at the summit. The trainers bring nothing new to the table, though there are a few standout interactions I'd like to mention to you. This man's Pokemon lost its life to Team Galactic's misdeeds, the first act of its kind since Generation 1. This couple came to the Lost Tower to mourn the Pokemon that caused them to meet. That's sweet, and I hope their love makes it to the grave. The Lost Tower is joined on Route 209 by the Hollowed Tower, the place where one obtains Spiritomb through talking to people underground 32 times and placing an odd keystone. It's shocking to me that nothing scary is happening in the Lost Tower, given that a location associated with a minimum of 108 mischievous spirits is just a rock's throw away. I understand that Spiritomb is sealed in the odd keystone itself, not the Hollowed Tower, but a place like that has to have some residual bad energy, or not, I guess. I guess we would only find out if Team Galactic went there to cause trouble like Team Rocket before them. But they don't. And nothing really interesting happens in the Lost Tower when we visit it. The Celestial Tower of Unova is a return to form for Burial Grounds. By that I mean it's a straightforward climb to the top with basically no diversity of spawns. Like Pokemon Tower before it, it really only features its region's iconic ghost type. LGM are here, much like Pokemon Tower has Cubone, but who makes a trip to get either of those for their team? Presumed to be buried here is Alder's first partner Pokemon, who died of an illness. What's interesting to me about Celestial Tower is the perceptions of death that the people of Unova share. In the minds of Unovans, a person's dreams, hopes, and relationships are laid to rest alongside them. I subscribe to those beliefs, I think. In my opinion, that's why it's a little bit more devastating when one dies young. Everybody has things they want to come to pass, and seeing those dreams go unrealized cuts deep. Despite this more bleak take though, the trainers here express a lot of hope and acceptance. The presence of Litwick here provides some minor evidence that perhaps the Pokedex isn't the most reliable source of information. According to its entry from Black and White 2, the flame atop a Litwick is usually out. A Litwick only burns bright when absorbing life energy, so either this process isn't actually harmful, or it's merely legend. Regardless, people aren't dropping after visiting here, which is a good sign. One of the most interesting mundane side quests in all of Gen 5 plays out in the Celestial Tower. The basic premise is that the husband of this newlywed couple sends us to climb the tower and ring the bell for the sake of their marriage. 4 new trainers show up and stop us at each of the stairwells. 4 women who don't want to see the marriage succeed. Given that the wife says nothing about them, and the first letters of their names spell out the word jilt, I think these girl bosses are the husband's scorned exes. Not sure if a cemetery is the best place to be doing all of this, but power to them for going through all this trouble and then conceding. That takes guts. I don't know if any of this is indicative in any way of how their marriage will go, but I feel strongly that events like this are only the beginning for them. The next burial ground takes us to Kalos, specifically Route 10 Standing Stones. Their real-life inspiration are the granite Karnak stones of Brittany and other similar Bronze Age monuments. Specifically, the Menhir for which the route's alternate name comes from, Menhir Trail. Their exact purpose has been lost to time, and various mythological origins have come up in the past, such as them being erected by giants. Most relevant to our purposes today, though, is the idea that in large groups, each standing stone was a soldier turned to stone. In Pokemon X and Y, each one is the grave of a Pokemon whose life energy was absorbed to power AZ's ultimate weapon 3,000 years ago. I believe that this makes Route 10 in Geosenge Town the oldest graveyard in the Pokemon series. The truth behind these mysterious monoliths is mostly forgotten by the people of Kalos, until Lysander reactivates the weapon. It's a little sad and totally understandable that no one would remember the true purpose of the Standing Stones millennia after the fact, well, except for AZ the Wanderer himself. I'd like to ask you a question that I've been chewing on for a while. Is it more sad to be remembered by no one, or only one person? I can see the arguments for both, and I can't really come to a conclusion myself. My brain is too smooth, and I'm too busy talking about Pokemon. Howley Cemetery is one of 2 graveyards in Alola, located on Melemele Island. Honestly, it's not that exciting. And that's fine, because it's a graveyard. It's perhaps most famous for this cutscene that occurs once you obtain the Ride Pager. A woman mourns her husband with their Machamp and recounts the tale of how he lost his life saving the Pokemon from an accident. This is significant to me in that it's the first overt cause of death for a resident of a graveyard in the Pokemon series, to my knowledge. Cubone's mother Marowak's cause of death isn't more specific than Team Rocket did it, and we only know that Alder's first Pokemon passed away from an illness. On the flip side, this man died in a Ride Pokemon accident. We don't know exactly whether the at-fault party was on a Pokemon as well or in a vehicle, but we know that he has a family and his own life that has kept this widow from hating him. That's pretty darn specific. This Machamp also has a fair bit of survivor's guilt, which is sad. Memorial Hill is also in Alola. It's located on Akala Island off Route 9 and serves primarily as a tourist location. Unlike Howley Cemetery, it isn't in use. Important people in Pokemon were buried here what I can only assume was generations ago. They chose this spot due to its proximity to the ruins of life in Tapu Lele. There are still plenty of ghosts here though, so I'm not sure what exactly was accomplished in doing that. Nobody here is mourning anyone specific, and in fact this little boy doesn't seem to understand what happens after life. We also have another case of someone wanting to be buried with their Pokemon, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because I've been thinking, how long does the average Pokemon live? We see plenty of cases of trainers outliving their Pokemon. It's often played as a particularly tragic event, but no one says anything about it being premature. On the other hand, most graveyards are Pokemon exclusive, so it doesn't surprise me that we don't hear about people passing prematurely. Surely the lifespan of the average Pokemon is shorter than a human's, particularly the regular mammalian Pokemon that seem to be the most common among the mourned. I also think we would hear of more cases of Pokemon outliving trainers if they had lifespans similar to our own. Given just how many graveyards are for Pokemon only, I think it's uncommon for humans and Pokemon to be interred together. Basically, what I'm getting at is this lady probably has a very strong bond with her Rockruff. One that might transcend death. She doesn't care how inconvenient it might be. That's kind of cool for an NPC with one set of dialogue. But I've been yapping long enough, so I think it's about time we wrap this up. I know there are 1 or 2 other places in the Switch Games DLCs, but I haven't played them, and it would be kind of odd to speak about places I haven't experienced. Maybe one day. For now, let's talk about which ones are my favorites and why. Before I give you my top 3, I want to tell you which place ranks dead last, because I feel passionate about it. Sinnoh's Lost Tower. It feels like an afterthought and is so out of place in the region. It comes across like the developers were unsure where to put it and hastily slapped it next to the place with the unknown and the Spiritomb rock. Given more development time, I wouldn't be surprised if Spiritomb would have appeared within the Lost Tower. It seems so odd to put it outside, but then again, it probably outdated the Lost Tower by centuries. My third most liked Pokemon graveyard is the Pokemon Tower. It's classic, it's iconic, it started it all, but I think most of the mystique comes from sources outside of the game. It stands out as being one of the most volatile and dangerous Pokemon graveyards until it's moved. It's awesome. However, it would be a disservice to what came after it to rank the Pokemon Tower any higher. In second place is Mount Pyre. It's not just a graveyard, it's a mountain with its own ecosystem. It also seems to have been a place of significance before they started interring people and Pokemon here. In the remakes, there are ruins. Mount Pyre feels like the natural evolution of the themes introduced with the Pokemon Tower. I don't think it would be half as interesting without Lavender Town having come before it. The trainer selection being composed of regular people and not just paranormal finalists elevates Mount Pyre for me. And the blue ribbon goes to Memorial Pillar. Okay, hear me out. I think Tectonix's Memorial is one of the most special places in all of Pokemon. As opposed to nearly every other burial ground in the Pokemon series, Memorial Pillar stands alone as a sole monument to one Pokemon that was very special to one person. It's intimate and personal, and made even more so by the fact that the one who built it still maintains it. And therein lies the tragedy. When the trainer is gone, the Memorial Pillar will serve not just as a monument for Tectonix, but the devotion its trainer felt toward it. We have the unique opportunity to witness something before it's lost to time. I think that's very special, and should remind us all to take time to appreciate what we have before it's gone, because it will be gone, eventually. All of it. The Fame Checker from Fire Red and Leaf Green is among the more interesting key items in Pokemon. It only appeared once, and never since. If you don't know, it's essentially a tape recorder that automatically registers gossip about famous people. That's kind of funny, and it's exactly the kind of thing I like about Pokemon's world building. The main reason why I like the Fame Checker so much is that it's just for fun. There's no reward for completing it, and thus no pressure. It only exists to flesh out the world. Nothing more. Today I thought I'd go through all the little tidbits you can learn and where to get them while adding my thoughts and commentary. Before we begin, there are a few things about the Fame Checker that you need to know if you want to follow along. First, as far as I know, none are missable. Secondly, some are progression locked. Kanto is incredibly open as soon as you get the cut HM, but some text boxes don't populate until certain trainers have been defeated. Finally, some tidbits and interactions populate two people's entries at the same time. Again, I'll mention them as they come in. Professor Oak is the first notable trainer we meet, and his Fame Checker entries teach us a lot about how these are going to go. His first entry can be obtained by interacting with the sign in front of his lab, Oak Pokemon Research Lab. Reading of a sign outside a famous person's location is a staple of the Fame Checker, as you'll come to learn. Most of the time, like Oak's, they're no-brainers. I mean, we know he's a Pokemon researcher. The second entry is another staple type of the Fame Checker, an unrepeatable line of dialogue you need to see to progress through the story. To make a complete guide on all of the Pokemon in the world, that was my dream. He says this at the beginning while tasking you to go off on your journey. Line 3 is obtained by speaking to this Oak's aide. Professor Oak may not look like much, but he's the authority on Pokemon. Many Pokemon trainers hold him in high regard. He is probably the most famous and present Pokemon researcher we can encounter in the series. Line 4 is obtained in a Pokemon journal, an overlooked feature of the Pokemon centers in other areas of Fire Red and Leaf Green. The journal is something of a tabloid, and often it doesn't populate until the trainers it mentions are defeated. We don't fight Oak, so it's just here in Viridian City. The journal reports something you probably already know, in that Professor Oak has 2 grandchildren, Daisy and the rival, who he lives with. Other journals are more interesting. The next entry comes fairly late in the game when challenging Agatha. I hear Oak's taken a lot of interest in you, child. That old duff was once tough and handsome, but that was decades ago. He's a shadow of his former self. This tells us a few things about Agatha. She may place more value on the strength of a trainer than anything else, and she's known Oak for a long time. Finally, after the credits roll, one of the professor's aides has a new line of dialogue. Professor Oak is going to have his own radio show soon. The program will be called Professor Oak's Pokemon Seminar. This is a neat little reference to his role in the Johto games, and is one of many Johto references that connect this version of Kanto to the rest of the series retroactively. After obtaining all of the Fame Checker entries for a character, you receive a message from them. Oaks reads, "Why do Pokemon compete in battles so hard for you? They do so because they can see the love and trust you have towards Pokemon. Never forget that." What's interesting is that it seems this is the secret to raising Pokemon. However, no one really rises to the heights that the player can. Very rarely a boss trainer will give you a run for your money, but narratively, the player characters have some secret to raising 6 Pokemon and wiping the floor with all opponents. Daisy Oak is next on the Fame Checker, and she's a surprisingly accomplished character. Only one of her entries is obtainable before the credits roll. The journal that also serves as Professor Oak's 4th entry. Incidentally, it's her 4th as well. The Fame Checker is the only way to see this full sprite of her, because she's one of only 3 trainers exclusive to the Fame Checker, mostly because you don't battle. Professor Oak would be one of them as well, but his sprite isn't exclusive to the Fame Checker because you see it for a while during the intro to the game. Daisy's first comes from another of Oak's aides, again, only in the post-game. If you show Daisy your Pokemon, she can tell you how much it likes you. Occasionally, she will even groom a Pokemon for you. In the post-game, every 500 steps, you can bring a Pokemon to Daisy to get +3 to its current friendship stat through grooming it. In the post-game, the woman next to the Vermilion Pokemon Fan Club president will compare him to Daisy and admits that, The person who's most liked by Pokemon is Daisy, I think. Although it isn't explicitly stated, we can see a photo of a Clefairy that is likely her partner Pokemon. Thirdly, returning to the man who gives you the Togepi egg in Water Labyrinth with a Togepi in your party will cause him to say it reminds him of someone. She was gently grooming Pokemon, she was a little angel. That little girl's name? I think it was Daisy. We start to get the idea that she's pretty renowned for taking care of Pokemon. The next is obtained by returning to the woman who gives you the tea in Celadon. She checks in on you, clocks you as being from Pallet Town, and says there's also a girl from Pallet Town, Daisy. She enjoys tea every day. She visits the Celadon department store to buy some tea. This was a trait that was doubled down on in later installments. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, she has a mug and mentions tea when grooming your Pokemon in those games. The final can be found in Four Islands Pokemon Center in its copy of Pokemon Journal. It reads, "The Spring Pokemon Contest's Grand Champion is Daisy Oak of Pallet Town." She's clearly accomplished, but you'd never know. This mention of contests makes me wonder if there's any evidence they were considered for inclusion in Fire Red and Leaf Green. If anybody knows, let me know down below. After completing all 6, Daisy says, "While I was comfortably enjoying my tea breaks, you've grown very skilled and powerful. I hope you'll remain a good rival to my little brother." I wonder if she's semi-retired or taking a sabbatical. As far as I can tell, she hasn't had any more notable accomplishments. Daisy Oak actually hasn't appeared in a game since Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Due to Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee having alternate protagonists and rivals, she's replaced by Trace's sister. In fact, Daisy Oak is the only named non-playable character from the original Red and Green to not appear in those games. Brock, the first gym leader, is next, and what we learn about him also informs us of the trainer culture in Kanto. Pewter City Pokemon Gym. Leader, Brock, the rock-solid Pokemon trainer. Number 2 is something he says before you challenge him. "My rock-hard willpower is evident in even my Pokemon. My Pokemon are all rock-hard and have true grit determination." That's right. My Pokemon are all the rock type. Again, these first 2 are usually no-brainers for gym leaders. The third can be obtained by speaking to this person who says, "There aren't many serious Pokemon trainers here. They're all like bug catchers, just hobbyists. But Pewter Gym's Brock isn't like that, not one bit." I really like this dialogue because it says a lot about at least the Pokemon training culture of Kanto. In combination with its size, population, and lack of later installment staples and attractions, it makes Kanto seem like a backwater where not a lot happens. Other than the hostile takeover by a criminal organization. Pokemon trainer is actually not the common occupation that it may seem. Instead, other than a few exceptions like the playable character, the vast majority of trainers are not career trainers, they're just hobbyists. On Route 4 outside Mount Moon, another boy tells us, "Brock is cool, he's not just tough. People like and respect him. I want to become a gym leader like him." People obviously look up to Brock. Within Mount Moon, this hiker says, "Hi, I'm excavating for fossils here under Mount Moon. Sometimes Brock of Pewter Gym lends me a hand." This fleshes out the world just by implying that Brock personally knows this random guy. I like it. Finally, after obtaining Cut, you can read the Pokemon Journal in the Pewter Museum. The tabloid reads, "Brock rarely laughs, but is said to be unable to stop if he starts. It's interesting to imagine Brock as a stern person if you watch the anime." Enough said. Brock's message to the player reads, "In this big world of ours, there must be many tough trainers. Let's both keep training and making ourselves stronger." Kind of generic. Misty is next up on the fame checker, and she may not be the expert she appears to be. Her sign reads, "Cerulean City Pokemon Gym. Leader, Misty, the tomboyish mermaid." And she says, "My policy is an all-out offensive with water-type Pokemon when you fight her." The third is obtained from Lewis in her gym and is similarly generic. Misty is a trainer who's going to keep on improving. She won't lose to someone like you. Entry 4 is in the remote Seafoam Islands, in which someone shares a rumor. Strong trainers and water Pokemon are common sights in these parts. They say that Misty of the Cerulean Gym trains here. Well, it would be the place. Practically all of Kanto's non-tentacle or gift water types are crammed into the islands and the surrounding area. Fifth is back near Cerulean Cape by Bill's place. This cape is a famous date spot. Misty, the gym leader, has high hopes about this place. She's actually on a date in the Johto games when we interrupt her as part of the machine part side quest. Finally, only after seeing the credits, Cerulean City's Pokemon Journal reads, "Misty is said to worship Lorelei of the Elite Four." I wonder if that rumor about her training in Seafoam Islands is in any way related to this rumor. There's a lot of water in Kanto, but not much ice. Misty's message kind of casts doubt on all of this though. "I'm going to keep training here at this gym. When I get better, I'd love to hit the road and travel." This doesn't sound like someone who leaves Cerulean City often. It makes her seem like a rookie in conjunction with what Lewis says. I wouldn't be surprised if she was the newest gym leader at the time. Lieutenant Surge is where we start learning some interesting things that lead to some interesting questions. His existence is loaded. His gym sign reads Vermilion City Pokemon Gym. Leader, Lieutenant Surge, the Lightning American. Yeah, originally he was from the United States, just straight up. They stopped doing real-world references a while ago, and Lieutenant Surge is kind of the poster child for them. He's up there with Indian Elephants, Guyana, and the Space Shuttle Columbia. Now, Lieutenant Surge is known as the Lightning Lieutenant, though it's worth mentioning his rank is Major in the original Japanese. Loaded text box number 2 comes when you challenge Surge, when he says, I tell you, kid, electric Pokemon saved me during the war, and oh boy did this text box get mileage. The mysterious war that makes Vermilion Gym seem like a VFW chapter was the topic of many a speculation video a decade ago. I thought I'd throw my hat into the ring briefly. Given that work on these games started in 1990, that Surge appears to be an older guy, and these games sort of take place in the real world but with Pokemon, I think Lieutenant Surge was a veteran of the Vietnam War. That would probably be the war that Americans referred to at the time. 3 and 4 add some more flavor. Through speaking with Gentleman Tucker, he says, When I was in the Army, Lieutenant Surge was my strict CO. He was a hard taskmaster. Lieutenant Surge was always famous for his cautious nature in the Army. Sounds like not just Pokemon, but also Surge's discipline got them through the war. Dwayne says, Lieutenant Surge installed the traps in this gym himself. He set up double locks everywhere. The Pokemon Journal and the Vermilion Pokemon Center that appears after defeating him kind of muddies the boots on the ground impression that Surge gives off. Lieutenant Surge is rumored to have been a pilot while home in America. He used the electricity generated by Pokemon to power his plane. So he was a pilot? I mean, I've already cast doubt on these as a tabloid, but I can't see a reason why this rumor couldn't go either way. I think we can all agree, though, he seems like a grunt. His message reads, Hey kid, you electrified me in our battle. I didn't know there were gutsy trainers like you. It made me change my mind about you. Surprisingly mundane after the speculation we just did, eh? Erica is up next, and her entries exemplify how low stakes and for fun these are. Leader Erica, the nature-loving princess. She tells you, I'm a student of the art of flower arranging. My Pokemon are solely of the grass type, and after beating her, I would never collect Pokemon if they were unattractive, so she finds Victreebel attractive. Last Lisa provides the third entry. Our leader Erica might be quiet, but she's famous around here. That's probably true of all gym leaders, famous around wherever they're from. Beauty Tamiya, also in the gym, says, we only use grass-type Pokemon in our gym. Why? We also use them for making flower arrangements. That provides an interesting question. Do the Pokemon help, or are they part of the arrangements? I could see either being plausible in the Pokemon world. After beating Erica, there's a Pokemon journal in the Celadon Mansion that reads, Rumor has it that if you peek into the Celadon gym, you can often see Erica snoozing. Her message to the player reads, I'm so glad that there are strong trainers like you. That awareness alone inspires and motivates me to try harder. Please visit me again. Zzz. Put stock into the tabloid, I think. Erica's entry is the ultimate example of why I love this feature. There's no functional reason for Erica to be a narcoleptic. As a fun fact, Erica's sprite changed from red, blue to yellow, but not to be more in line with her anime counterpart like other trainers with changed sprites. Instead, the direction of her kimono's fold is changed, because in the original, she wears it right over left, which is supposedly the way the departed are dressed for funerals. She's very much alive, and so she's worn it left over right ever since. I wonder if her sprite was drawn reversed and then flipped for release. Koga's entry is pretty interesting, and has a mistake with interesting implications. His first 2 entries are not interesting though. His sign and the thing he says to you are Fuchsia City Pokemon Gym, Leader Koga, the poisonous ninja master, and Despair to the creeping horror of poison-type Pokemon, respectively. Entry 3 comes from one of the trainers, a juggler named Kirk. Even though I've lost, I will keep training according to the teachings of Koga, my ninja master. It brings to mind the role of gym trainers. It seems like some of them are apprentices, some might be their friends and loyalists, and some are just orbiters. Entry 4 is what I alluded to earlier. After beating the Elite Four, a girl in Fuchsia City says, My father is the gym leader of this town. I'm training to use poison Pokemon as well as my father. This is Janine, a retroactive reference to the future gym leader of Gold, Silver, and Crystal. But if we look at the fame checker, the person this is credited to is Shireen? What do you think? Does Koga have 2 daughters, or does the English localization forget Janine was given a name? I'm going with the latter because in Japanese, the fame checker uses Anzu, which is Janine's Japanese name. A Pokemon journal that unlocks after beating Koga is in the Safari Warden's home and reads, Koga is said to have a thorough knowledge of medicine. He even concocts medicine to nurse his Pokemon to health. That's interesting, and I buy it. Narratively, for him to utilize poison effectively while keeping his targets alive, friendly poisoning, he has to have pretty intense knowledge of not just medicine, but Pokemon biology. The Safari Zone Rest House brings our last entry, with this guy saying, "The Safari Zone's huge, wouldn't you say? Fuchsia's gym leader Koga patrols the grounds every so often. Thanks to him, we can play here knowing that we're safe." This does bring up an interesting aspect of Pokemon behavior within the Safari Zone. Literally everywhere else, most Pokemon fight to failure to defend themselves. In this supposedly wild and untamed sanctuary that is also somehow simultaneously an all-ages attraction, the Pokemon are incredibly skittish. They don't dig in their heels, they flee. Is this due to Koga's influence in cowing the Pokemon? Have they gotten used to not needing to defend themselves and just opt for the easy route in fleeing? Regardless, it seems Koga has a hand in maintaining the peace. His final message is, "You and I, we must both set our sights higher and work towards meeting our challenges. Now, I must go train my daughter." This is something we know pans out, because several years later, he has become one of the Indigo Elite Four, and Janine has taken his place as Fuchsia's poison-type gym leader. Sabrina is next, although by now it's worth mentioning that you can basically fight the Kanto gym leaders in whatever order you like after Misty, so long as Giovanni is the last and Koga comes before Blaine. I usually fight Sabrina close to last because the Silphco shenanigans are pretty final, and I often forget there's other stuff to do in Saffron City. Doesn't help that her gym is usually really annoying. It's something to put off. Anyway, her sign reads Saffron City Pokemon Gym, leader Sabrina, the master of psychic Pokemon. Entry 2 actually isn't from her, like everyone else, but a boy on 3 Island who says, "You know about a girl gym leader in Saffron City? She's a psychic-type Pokemon, right?" This reads to me like the Sevi Islands are fairly divorced from goings-on in Kanto. Fun fact, after a while of being distinct from Kanto, Pokopia has a journal entry indicating that at some point, maybe retroactively always, the islands were considered part of Kanto. Sabrina's next 2 entries do stem from her, where she says, "I have had psychic powers since I was a child. It started when a spoon I carelessly tossed bent, and I dislike battling, but if you wish, I will show you my powers." You'd think that a gym leader position would be filled by someone who enjoys battling, but I suppose being strong enough is probably enough. After defeating her, a journal in the Saffron Pokemon Center now reads, "People say that Sabrina can communicate with their Pokemon during battle without speaking. This is something that I buy. Telepathy and telekinesis are powers common enough in the Pokemon games, and she demonstrates some of her own. Interestingly, after beating her, Sabrina claims that everyone has psychic power. Tyron in her gym provides the last entry saying, "Sabrina just wiped out the karate master next door." This is unsurprising, and has been the source of fandom in-jokes for a long time. They never stood a chance, but I digest. Sabrina's message reads, "The love you have towards your Pokemon. It was a power that was never bested by my psychic power. By the time of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Sabrina has come to believe that love is a psychic ability." It seems that a few of her lines were swapped in Fire Red and Leaf Green. After beating her, she hits you with a fun fact after giving out her TM. Only after voluntarily speaking to her does she explain said TM. Blaine, as we learn, is the kind of guy who would love a video like this. His first 2 entries come from his sign and him respectively, yada yada yada. Cinnabar Island Pokemon Gym, leader Blaine, the hot-headed quiz master, and my fiery Pokemon are all rough and ready with intense heat. They incinerate all challengers. Entry 3 comes from super nerd Derek in Cinnabar Gym. Our leader, Blaine, became lost in the mountains but good. Night fell and a fiery bird Pokemon appeared. Its light allowed Blaine to find his way down safely, so it sounds like Moltres once saved Blaine's life. Entry 4 gives us a little insight into Cinnabar's history. This woman says Cinnabar Gym's Blaine is quite the odd fellow. He's lived on the island since way before the lab was built. I wonder then, does she mean the current lab where we can revive fossils, or the mansion where Mewtwo was created? The next entry can be obtained by interacting with this wall within the gym. It's a photo of Blaine and Mr. Fuji. They're standing shoulder to shoulder with big grins. This is also an entry from Mr. Fuji, who is the last trainer we'll talk about. I'll save discussion of their shared history for later. A journal entry at Resort Gorgeous reads, Blaine is said to remove his dark shades only when he's thinking up new quiz questions. Knowing how quirky he can be and how dedicated to quizzes he is, I have no trouble believing this. Getting all of Blaine's entries nets us, my fire Pokemon. They'll become even more powerful. And now a quiz. How many kinds of fire-type Pokemon are there? Right now, counting forms and variants, there are 105. Oh, and all of them technically if you count terastallization. At the time, though, there were 29, counting cast form Sunny form. Jeez Louise, 20 years ago was a long time, and so many Pokemon since. Giovanni is our final gym leader, and the only one who we don't learn about via their sign. These entries are gained at the sites of various confrontations with Team Rocket. The first from the scuffle in Celadon. Team Rocket captures Pokemon from around the world. They're important tools for keeping our criminal enterprise going. I'm the leader, Giovanni. 2 from Silphco, those thugs that took over our building. Their boss said he was looking for strong Pokemon. I think the assault on Silphco was a desperate attempt by Team Rocket to not lose ground. Giovanni stumbled after their hideout was raided, and so he went looking for something he could use. Artificial Pokemon such as Porygon, research subjects, or other devices like the Silphscope. I don't think he had a plan. Team Rocket's boss is terribly cruel. To him, Pokemon are just tools to be used. When meeting him at his gym, he says, "Welcome to my hideout. It shall be so until I can restore Team Rocket to its former glory." When defeated, the gym guide says, "Blow me away. Giovanni was the gym leader of Viridian?" This line really intrigues me. When you talk to him before beating Giovanni, he says he doesn't know the identity of the leader. So did Giovanni literally just walk into the gym before you come to fight him? Did he sneak in through the window? I just don't know. The final entry comes after resolving the Team Rocket quest in the Sevi Islands, in which scientist Gideon remarks, You're not Giovanni's kid, are you?" No, that can't be right. Giovanni's kid has red hair. Another reference to the Johto games. Giovanni somehow gets a message to you after all that. "There's nothing I wish to say to you. I will concentrate solely on bettering myself, and none other." We see that he went into exile in the Johto games, and Silver, his son, is super fatherless and edgy. Lorelei is our first foray into the Elite Four, and a contender for the member we know the most about, at least in this game. "I'm Lorelei of the Elite Four, and no one can best me when it comes to icy Pokemon," she says when you fight her for the first time, gaining us entry 1 and 2. Everything else comes from the Sevi Islands, where she was born. We've had a great and powerful trainer grow up on this island. I bet even you'd know her. It's Lorelei of the Elite Four. It's hard to miss some of these through at least osmosis if you did the post-game quest. You team up with Lorelei and can visit her home. Barring that, she outright says she was born on 4 Island herself. So it's kind of weird to get a fame checker entry from someone else about it as if it's a profound rumor. An issue of Pokemon Journal on 5 Island provides the 4th. Known for her logical, calculated, and cool battling style, Lorelei has a surprising secret. I think I know what it is. A little girl on 4 Island tells us the next one. Did you know Lorelei has lots and lots of stuffed dolls? Every time she comes back to 4 Island, her collection grows. More accurately, every 25 times you fight her, she gets a new doll. That's probably the secret, that this cool and composed woman has a plush addiction. Finally, this old lady says the Lapras she has. I imagine it to be the one she met as a child. I believe it was an Icefall Cave that she caught it. Perhaps that Pokemon has been with her ever since. I think this is true. Lorelei refers to Team Rocket jeopardizing her Lapras' friends in Icefall Cave, and that's where you find the wild Lapras in these games. Her final message is, "I needed to thank you for your help, but that has nothing to do with our battles. You'd better watch out next time." I could be wrong, and I don't have the capabilities to test this right now, but I think it may be possible to obtain this message before you help her out. None of the NPC responses or the journal are locked behind milestone battles like others, as far as I can tell, but it's been a while since I did the Sevi Islands postgame quest, and it might be that these NPCs don't appear. Bruno says, "I am Bruno of the Elite Four, and I've lived and trained with my fighting Pokemon." That pretty much sums him up. Very blunt, very to the point. Pokemon Journal has an entry in Saffron City after beating him. Bruno apparently joined the Elite Four out of his burning ambition to battle the best trainers. Given the journal's tendency to be in a place significant to who it discusses, I wonder if he trained at the dojo. Likewise, in the post-game, this NPC at the Amber Spa states, "Bruno, who is a senior ahead of me, visits the spa on occasion. He comes to rehab injuries, both his own and his Pokemon's." Fifthly, on 2 Island, the woman by the market states after beating him, he's one of the Elite Four. His name is Bruno. He went away disappointed when he found out they were all sold out of Rage candy bars. Bruno's a contender for the most post-game exclusive entries, I think. Finally, in Savalt Canyon, we can learn from this black belt that even Bruno, he trained with a fellow by the name of Brawley before. A very rare direct reference to Hoenn within the Kanto remakes. Bruno's final message espouses the importance of training the self, not just Pokemon, a common value of fighting-type trainers. The superpower of your Pokemon in you I've experienced myself. Next time, maybe I should show you how to train yourself. Agatha herself gives you her 1st and 5th entries when facing her. I'm Agatha of the Elite Four, and I hear Oak's taken a lot of interest in you, child. That old Duff was once tough and handsome, but that was decades ago. He's a shadow of his former self. Which we discussed already with Oak. It's always interesting when characters have history we won't ever see. It's total dad lore, and I love these kinds of mysteries. After beating her, the second and third entries are obtained within the Indigo Plateau Pokemon Center. Agatha's Ghost-type Pokemon are horrifically terrifying in toughness, and that old lady's got a really short fuse too. It doesn't take anything to get that scary lady hollering. It's interesting, and says a lot narratively that she would focus on what was a poorly understood type of Pokemon at the time. That she has a temper is also kind of interesting. Was she always that way, or have the years made her crotchety, as they have for so many of our elderly? Number 4 comes from a Pokemon journal on Seven Island. In her youth, Agatha and Professor Oak were rivals who vied for supremacy as trainers. I think there's a fan game about these two, and I might check it out after this video. Entry 6 comes from an old lady on Island 6 who tells you to enjoy your life and live long. Take Agatha, for example. She set a record for being the oldest ever Elite Four member. That seems to still be true. Agatha's message is, when you grow older, don't you dare go soft like that old coot Oak. Be like me and keep battling on. She really hates him, oh my god. Lance gives us his first and second entry upon fighting him. I lead the Elite Four. You can call me Lance, the Dragon Trainer, and you know that dragons are mythical Pokemon. They're hard to catch and raise, but their powers are superior. They're virtually indestructible. There's no being clever with them. Guess bro never heard of a fairy type, or an ice type for that matter. In the post-game, this woman in the Saffron Pokemon fan club says, he stands for justice. He's cool and yet passionate. He's the greatest, Lance. This is pretty true. Lance comes to the aid of Pokemon in the Johto region even after becoming the champion, reigning over 2 regions. Now for the entry that inspired this video and my discussion on malls and department stores. We have a customer, Lance, who occasionally comes. He always buys capes. I wonder, does he have many identical capes at home? Check that video out for some mild existential dread. The Indigo Plateau holds our final 2 entries. Lance's grandfather is thought to be the elder of a famous clan of Dragon Masters from a Pokemon journal, and from what I've heard, Lance has a cousin who's a gym leader somewhere far away from this guy. Both reference the Blackthorn City Dragon Clan, specifically the Elder from Dragon's Den and Claire of the Gym. Lance's final message invites us to Blackthorn City. I'm considering going back to my hometown. I want to retrain my Dragon-type Pokemon and strengthen them. I'd like to invite you to my hometown someday. His training seems to have paid off, as just a few years later he's risen to champion status. Thus concludes the entries on boss trainers, and we move on to the final 2. Bill is the penultimate person of interest. Our rival gives us the first when we meet in Cerulean City, saying, after all, Bill's world famous as a Pokemaniac. He invented the Pokemon storage system on PC, too. A boy in the same city says, Bill has lots of Pokemon. He collects rare ones, too. His grandfather lives in Fuchsia and says of Bill, he's my grandson. He always liked collecting things, even as a child. He's not a trainer, but he has a lot of cool Pokemon, it would seem. He gifts Eevee in later installments, after all. The final 3 are gained randomly from Celio on one island after completing his side quest. Bill is a Pokemaniac, so he likes every kind. Apparently the first one he caught was an Abra. Lucky catch, especially for one who doesn't really train. Bill's hometown is Goldenrod City, where his folks still live. I've heard that it's quite the festive, bustling city. That they do, and that it is. We can visit him there in the Johto games. It's a small thing, but I'd wager that Abra came from one of the routes surrounding Goldenrod. It's interesting now that I think about it, but Abra are catchable next to both of his houses. The final rumor Celio shares with us is, apparently Bill can't stomach milk at all. That is definitely the most bro-through and a fun fact out of all of these entries. Bill's got lactose intolerance, I guess? This one really just stands out. His final message reads, hey there, Celio had nothing but praise for you. Hearing that makes me happy. When you catch some rare Pokemon, come show me, okay? Promise. I wonder what Celio actually had to say about us, because one of his things to say about Bill pertained to milk, and they're supposed to be friends. Mr. Fuji is the final entry, and they all speak to his character. The girl in his house states he's really kind. He looks after abandoned and orphaned Pokemon. He may not have always been like that, though. A Team Rocket grunt in Pokemon Tower provides the second. This old guy marched right up to our hideout. Then he starts ranting about how Team Rocket's abusing Pokemon, so we're just talking it over as adults. It takes a lot of gumption to stand up to gangsters like this with no Pokemon to back you up. In his house, we can find a Pokemon Fan Magazine monthly grand prize drawing. The application form, which is gone. It's been clipped out. Someone must have applied already. That this is attributed to Mr. Fuji's Fame Checker entry means he likely is a sweepstakes type of guy. Maybe he knows who won the Danimals Crush Cup giveaway. Fourth, a man in the Pokemon Center who just moved to Lavender himself remarks, I hear that Mr. Fuji's not from these parts originally either. I remind you of the photo of Blaine and Fuji on Cinnabar. They work together, and Mr. Fuji is likely doing all of this advocating and caring for Pokemon as penance for his treatment of Mew. A Pokemon journal on Cinnabar, accessible only after beating the game, solidifies has his Cinnabar connection by association, much like Bruno's. Editor: the shy Mr. Fuji turned down our interview requests. He's a kindly man who's adored and respected in Lavender Town. Does this mean that every other Pokemon journal contains interviews from the people they're gathering rumors about? Mr. Fuji's selfless personality is exemplified by the final Fame Checker message. Instead of hoping for the happiness of just your Pokemon, can I get you to wish for the happiness of all Pokemon? How sweet. If you didn't know, it's suggested that Mr. Fuji and Blaine by association worked in the Cinnabar Mansion creating Mewtwo. Mr. Fuji's story is one of redemption and atonement, and it's completely unnecessary to tell us all that. It's simply background lore, the kind of lore that Pokemon excels at. I love the Fame Checker. I wish that Pokemon games had dialogue logs like were common in RPGs and visual novels. This feature comes close, and it elevates the world of Fire Red and Leaf Green to me. This tiny world on a colorful little rectangle is made so much larger by the simple addition of this item. Thank you all for watching. I've been the Sludge King. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by commenting, liking, or subscribing. Those metrics give me a pretty good idea when you all like something I've done. Also, if you're interested in getting some Sludge King content when I'm not reading off of a script, you can check out my Twitch account. I've also got a Blue Sky and an Instagram where I post pretty infrequently.
If you'll excuse me though, I need to go ingest copious amounts of lactose.
Did you hear that? I've heard about this, but I've never seen it. Miltank must be using its milk to transfer its milk to other Pokemon in order to heal them.
So you mean that this must be the secret?
I think so.
Yay!